A starving German shepherd dragged a rusty collar to a Navy SEAL's door. What was inside broke him. A starving German shepherd stood outside Caleb Rourke's cabin at midnight, shaking so badly the rusty collar in her mouth tapped against the frozen porch. Caleb had been a Navy SEAL once, the kind of man who could walk into gunfire without blinking. But 3 years after his wife Hannah died, he could barely walk past her blue scarf hanging beside the door. The dog didn't bark. She didn't beg. She simply lowered her head and dropped the collar at his feet. And when Caleb opened it, something small slipped out onto the wood. A folded note. The handwriting was impossible, because it belonged to the woman he had buried 3 winters ago. Stay with this story, because by the end you may see loyalty in a way you never have before. And tell us the city you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Caleb did not know it yet, but the starving German shepherd had not come to his door by accident. She had come carrying the one thing that could break him, and maybe save him. By the time Caleb Rourke opened the cabin door, the starving German shepherd had already dragged the rusty collar through half a mile of snow. The storm had swallowed Briar Falls whole that night. Snow came sideways through the dark pines, hissing across the roof of Caleb's cabin, and piling against the steps like the world was trying to bury every road, every fence line, every memory a man might still be holding on to. The porch light flickered above him, weak and yellow, making the dog look almost unreal. She was thin enough that Caleb could count the ridges of her ribs beneath her wet coat. Her ears were low, her legs trembled. Ice clung to the fur around her chest and belly, and one of her front paws barely touched the porch boards, as if every step had cost her more than she had left to give. But it was the collar that held Caleb still, not the one around her neck, the one in her mouth. It was old, rusted. Too small for her, a strip of cracked leather with a metal buckle turned dark from weather and time. She held it gently between her teeth like it was not trash, not something found in a ditch or dragged from an abandoned yard, but something precious, something she had carried through the storm. Caleb's hand stayed wrapped around the edge of the door. He had opened it expecting wind, maybe a fallen branch, maybe the loose shutter on the shed finally breaking free. He had not expected a dog. And he had not expected the ache that came with seeing one. "Easy, girl," he said softly. His voice sounded strange in the doorway, rusted almost. He did not use it much anymore, not inside the cabin. The German shepherd did not wag her tail. She did not step forward. She only lowered her head, set the old collar on the porch between them, and backed away one careful step. Caleb looked from the collar to the dog, then back to the collar. The porch light buzzed above him. Behind Caleb, inside the warm cabin, the old blue scarf still hung on the wooden peg beside the door. Hannah's scarf. 3 years had passed, but he had never moved it, not once, not even to dust the wall behind it. The wool had faded a little, the blue softened by time, but if Caleb stood too close, he could still imagine the smell of her lavender soap in it. So he avoided that corner, avoided the peg. Avoided the memory of her laughing as she wrapped it around her neck and told him Montana winters were not for proud men who refused to wear gloves. Tonight, the scarf shifted slightly in the draft from the open door. Caleb swallowed. The German shepherd gave a small sound then, not a bark, not even a whine, just a thin breath almost lost beneath the wind. Caleb knew that sound. He had heard men make it before, not when they were afraid, when they were trying not to be. He stepped outside slowly, keeping one hand low where she could see it. The cold hit him hard. It pushed through his flannel shirt, bit into his fingers, and made the old scar along his left shoulder tighten. Snow blew across the porch and landed on the collar between his boots. The dog watched every movement. Her eyes were amber, clouded with exhaustion, but still alert. Too alert. The eyes of an animal that had learned the world was not always kind. Caleb crouched. The German shepherd flinched. He stopped instantly. "All right," he murmured. "No cages, no grabbing, just warmth." The word warmth felt like something Hannah would have said. He reached behind him without looking and pulled the cabin door wider. Firelight spilled across the porch boards. The smell of coffee, wood smoke, and old pine rolled into the storm. The dog's nose twitched. For the first time, her focus left Caleb and moved past him into the room. There was a bowl on the kitchen counter from Caleb's dinner. Venison stew barely touched. These days he cooked out of habit more than hunger. A man could survive a long time on coffee, toast, and stubbornness, but a starving dog could not. Caleb rose carefully and backed into the cabin, leaving the door open. He moved to the kitchen, took the stew, and scraped the meat into a clean pan. Then he added warm water from the kettle to soften it. His hands moved automatically. Quiet. Controlled. the way they had moved years ago when pressure was not a feeling but an environment. He had been good at crisis once. Very good. That was what people in town still remembered. Caleb Rourke, former Navy SEAL, the man who had served overseas, the man who could fix a roof, clear a fallen tree, carry an injured ranch hand half a mile through snow without asking for help. They remembered the uniform. They remembered the strength. They did not see him at 3 in the morning, sitting in the dark kitchen with one hand around a cold mug, staring at a chair nobody sat in anymore. He brought the pan to the doorway and set it just inside the threshold. The German shepherd leaned forward, then stopped. Her injured paw shook. Caleb stepped back. "Your choice," he said. "Door stays open." The wind roared through the gap, throwing snow across the floorboards. He did not close it. For almost a minute the dog did not move. Then hunger won over fear. She limped into the cabin 1 inch at a time. Her claws clicked softly on the wood. Her head stayed low. Every few steps she looked back at the storm as if expecting something to come through it after her. Caleb saw that too, the looking back, the listening. This dog was not only lost, she was running from something. She reached the pan and began to eat, not fast. That worried him more. A healthy, starving dog would gulp, choke, fight the bowl. This one lowered herself carefully, took a few mouthfuls, then paused as if even eating hurt. Caleb closed the door halfway but left enough space that she would not feel trapped. Then he saw the blood. It was faint at first, just a dark smear on the porch where she had been standing. Another near the threshold, another beneath her lifted paw. "Easy," Caleb whispered. The dog stiffened at the sound of his voice. He went still again. Her eyes moved to his hands. He knew what she was asking without words. "Are you going to hurt me too?" Caleb's throat tightened. "No," he said, "not tonight." He grabbed an old towel from beside the stove and knelt several feet away, letting her see it. She watched him with the pan between them. He tossed the towel gently across the floor. It landed near her front paw. She sniffed it. Then so slowly it hurt to watch, she lowered herself onto it. That was trust, not full trust, not even close, but enough. Caleb exhaled for the first time since opening the door. "You came a long way, didn't you?" The dog blinked once. Her body shivered harder now that the heat of the cabin had reached her. Caleb knew that could happen. Cold could numb pain. Warmth brought it back. Her muscles trembled beneath her wet coat, and when she tried to shift her weight, the injured paw curled under her. Caleb stood. The German shepherd's head lifted sharply. "Just the phone," he said. He crossed to the wall beside the kitchen and picked up the landline. Cell service in Briar Falls died whenever the weather got serious, and tonight the mountains had gone silent under snow. He dialed Dr. Elaine Porter's number from memory. She answered on the 6th ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Caleb, I've got a dog here." The silence on the other end changed. Elaine was a vet. She had heard that sentence in every possible tone. She knew when it meant a stray at the fence and when it meant something worse. "How bad?" she asked. "Starved. Hypothermic, maybe. Front paw bleeding. She walked here carrying an old collar." "Carrying?" "In her mouth." Another pause. "Is she responsive?" "Barely, eating a little, breathing shallow but steady." "Keep her warm, not hot, small amounts of food, no pressure on the paw if you can help it. Can you bring her in?" Caleb looked through the small kitchen window. The snow outside was no longer falling. It was attacking. The road to town curved down through 6 miles of timber, 2 bridges, and a ridge that turned slick as glass after midnight. Even with chains on the truck, it would be ugly, but ugly had never stopped him before. "I can try." "No," Elaine said quickly. "Not if the road is gone. I'll come to you." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Elaine, don't be foolish. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. She might not make it that long." "Then listen carefully." Her voice sharpened, losing the sleep. "Get blankets. Dry her coat as much as she'll allow. Keep her on her side if she gets weak. Check her gums. If they're white or blue, tell me. And Caleb?" "Yeah, do not let her back outside." Caleb looked at the German shepherd, at the way her eyes had drifted from the food to the closed part of the door, as if some part of her still believed the storm was calling her back. "I won't." He hung up. For the next 20 minutes, Caleb moved around the cabin with a gentleness that would have surprised anyone who knew only the old stories about him. He warmed towels near the stove. He slid a blanket across the floor. He added water to the pan. He kept his voice low and steady, saying nothing important, only things meant to fill the room with calm. "That's it, girl. Slow. You're safe." The German shepherd allowed the blanket near her shoulder, then over her back. But when Caleb reached toward her injured paw, she pulled away and gave a warning growl so weak it almost broke his heart. He withdrew immediately. "Fair enough." The fire cracked. The old house settled. Outside, the storm pressed against the windows with white hands. Inside, the dog's eyes began to close. Caleb should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the old feeling rise in him. The one he hated most, not fear, recognition, because he knew what it looked like when a living thing was deciding whether to stay. He had seen it in field hospitals, in the eyes of friends, in Hannah's face the last time they spoke through a frozen video call that kept breaking apart. She had smiled at him, tired but brave, and told him not to worry. He had believed her because he needed to. By morning, she was gone. Caleb turned away from the dog and gripped the edge of the counter. The cabin blurred. For 3 years, he had told himself grief was something to carry quietly, something private. Something a man folded into his chest and locked down until it became part of his bones. But this dog had walked out of a storm with death on her back and a rusty collar in her mouth. And suddenly every locked door inside him was rattling. He looked toward the porch. The collar still lay there where she had dropped it. Snow had blown across the threshold before he closed the door, leaving tiny white crystals on the cracked leather. Caleb had been so focused on the dog that he had not touched it. Now he stepped toward it. The German shepherd's eyes opened, her head lifted. A low sound came from her chest, not a growl this time, a plea. Caleb froze. "You want that?" The dog stared at the collar, her ears trembled. Caleb crouched and picked it up carefully. The leather was stiff with age, the buckle had rusted nearly shut. There was no tag hanging from it, no name, no phone number, nothing that should have made it worth carrying through a blizzard. But as Caleb turned it in his hands, he felt something strange, a thickness inside the folded leather, a hidden seam. His pulse changed. The German shepherd struggled to rise. "No, no," Caleb said. "Stay down." But she pushed herself up anyway, trembling under the blanket, eyes locked on the collar. Caleb carried it to the kitchen table and set it beneath the lamp. The warm light revealed scratches along the inner band, not random scratches. Letters, old, worn, almost swallowed by age. He leaned closer. H.R. Caleb stopped breathing. Hannah Rourke. For a moment there was no storm, no fire, no dog, no cabin, only those 2 letters, his wife's initials. He told himself it was impossible. HR could mean anything, a ranch name, a maker's mark, someone else's initials from some other life, but his hands were no longer steady. He reached for the small knife he kept in the drawer and eased the blade under the hidden seam. The leather resisted, then split open with a dry crack. Something fell onto the table. A folded piece of paper no bigger than 2 fingers. Yellowed, fragile, protected inside the collar for years. The German shepherd let out one soft whimper. Caleb stared at the paper. He knew before he opened it. Some truths do not wait for proof. They arrive in the body first, in the cold along the spine, in the hand that refuses to move, in the heart suddenly beating like it is trying to escape. Slowly, Caleb unfolded the note. The handwriting inside was faded. But he knew every curve, every gentle slant, every letter, Hannah. His knees weakened and he had to grip the table. The first line read, "Caleb, if this ever finds you, it means mercy made it home." Behind him, the starving German shepherd collapsed onto the floor. And this time, she did not get back up. The German shepherd hit the cabin floor like her body had finally spent the last piece of strength it had been saving. Mercy. Caleb did not mean to say the name. He had only read it seconds earlier on the note, written in Hannah's hand, in a sentence that should not have existed. Caleb, if this ever finds you, it means mercy made it home. But the moment the dog collapsed, the name came out of him like it had been waiting in his chest for years. Mercy. The dog lay on her side near the stove, the blanket twisted under her ribs, her injured paw curled toward her chest. Her eyes were half open, but they no longer followed him. Her breathing came shallow and uneven, each breath dragging through her like the storm had crawled inside her lungs. Caleb dropped the note on the table and moved to her, not fast. Fast, frightened, wounded things, he knew that. He slid down beside her, one knee on the floor, one hand hovering near her shoulder without touching. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Come on, girl, you got here, don't leave now." Mercy's ear flicked at his voice. That small movement nearly broke him. He turned toward the kitchen wall and grabbed the phone so hard the receiver knocked against the wood. Elaine answered before the first ring finished. "I'm on my way," she said. "She collapsed." Elaine's breathing changed on the other end. Caleb could hear wind behind her now, the slam of a truck door, the crunch of boots on frozen gravel. "Is she breathing?" "Yes, shallow." "Gums." Caleb set the phone down on the floor beside him and carefully lifted Mercy's lip. Her gums were pale, not blue, but too pale. "White," he said, "almost. Keep her wrapped, keep her head low, don't force food. If she vomits, turn her slightly so she doesn't choke." Caleb grabbed another towel from the chair and tucked it around Mercy's back. His hands were steady because they had to be. Inside him, nothing was steady. "How far are you?" he asked. 20 minutes if the ridge lets me pass." "The ridge won't." "Then 30. "Elaine, do not start with me, Caleb Rourke." He shut his mouth. There had been a time when that tone might have made him smile. Elaine Porter was 5'4", silver-haired, widowed, and capable of making ranchers twice her size apologize to goats. The whole town knew better than to argue with her when an animal was on the line. Tonight, Caleb did not have the strength to argue anyway. The line crackled. "Talk to her," Elaine said. "What?" "Talk to her, keep her anchored. Animals hear more than we think. Tell her she's safe." Caleb looked down at Mercy. Her body trembled beneath the blanket. One eye shifted faintly toward him. He swallowed. "I don't know what to say." Elaine was quiet for a second, then her voice softened. "Yes, you do." The line went dead. Caleb stared at the receiver. Outside, the storm hammered the cabin. Snow blew so hard against the windows it sounded like handfuls of gravel. The fire had burned low and the room pulsed with weak orange light. Mercy's breathing hitched. Caleb put the phone aside and lowered himself fully to the floor beside her. For 3 years, he had avoided speaking to anything that might answer back only in silence. He did not talk to Hannah's photograph. He did not pray out loud. He did not even speak much to himself. Silence was easier. Silence did not ask questions. Silence did not look at him with eyes that seemed to know he had failed to come home in time, but Mercy was looking at him now. Barely. Still, she was looking. So Caleb spoke. "You picked a rough night," he said quietly. Mercy's ear moved again. "That road out there is bad even in daylight. At midnight in this storm, carrying that old thing," he glanced at the collar on the kitchen table. "You must be the stubbornest dog in Montana." Her breathing remained uneven. Caleb reached slowly for the edge of the blanket and pulled it closer around her chest. She did not growl this time. That was the first change, small but real. "There you go," he whispered. "No cages, no chains. Just warmth." The phrase seemed to settle between them. He kept talking because Elaine had told him to, and because once he began, stopping felt dangerous. He told Mercy about Briar Falls, though she had probably crossed half of it to find him. He told her about the creek behind the cabin that froze over every December. He told her about the old mule deer that came down from the ridge and ate the bark off his young apple trees. He told her about the wood stove, which groaned at night like an old man with secrets. He did not mean to tell her about Hannah, but grief has a way of entering through the smallest open door. "She would have liked you," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. Caleb looked away toward the scarf by the door. The blue wool hung in the same place as always, moving softly whenever the cabin breathed. "Hannah never could pass a stray," he said. "Cat, dog, bird with one wing didn't matter. If it looked lonely, she brought it home." Mercy's eyes closed. For a terrifying second, Caleb thought she had slipped away. Then her chest rose. He leaned closer, watching. Another breath came, then another. Caleb let his head fall back against the cabinet behind him. "Good girl," he whispered. "Good girl, Mercy." The name no longer felt strange. That frightened him more than anything. He had known this dog for less than an hour, and already the thought of losing her pressed against a place inside him that had not healed. Not even close. The wound had not closed. It had only learned to hide under routine. Coffee at 6. Firewood at 7. Repairs that did not need repairing. A chair left empty at dinner. A scarf left by the door. A life that kept moving only because the clock did. Mercy gave a faint whine. Caleb looked down. Her nose had shifted toward his hand. He froze. Then he opened his fingers slowly and placed his palm flat on the floor a few inches from her muzzle. No reaching. No taking. Only offering. For a while, Mercy did nothing. Then, with great effort, she moved her head just enough that her nose touched his knuckles. It was barely contact, a brush, a breath, but it went through Caleb like a hand laid over his heart. He closed his eyes. The last living thing that had touched him with trust had been Hannah, squeezing his fingers through a hospital screen from 3,000 miles away, telling him she was tired but fine. She had lied to protect him, or maybe she had hoped it was true. Mercy's nose rested against his hand again. This time, she did not pull away. The truck arrived 37 minutes later. Caleb heard it before he saw the headlights, the low growl of an engine fighting the mountain road, tires biting through snow, then slipping, then catching again. Light swept across the window in pale bars. Mercy startled, her head lifted. "Easy," Caleb said. The engine cut outside. A door opened. Wind crashed into the night. Boots hit the porch. A sharp knock came at the door. Mercy tried to rise. Caleb put one hand near her shoulder, not holding her down, only giving her something solid. "It's help," he murmured. She's help. The door opened before he reached it. Elaine Porter stepped in carrying a black medical bag, snow across her coat and gray hair, cheeks red from the cold. She kicked the door shut behind her with her heel and took in the room in one glance. Caleb on the floor, the dog by the stove, the collar on the table, the note lying open under the lamp. Her eyes paused on the note, only for a second. Then the vet took over. "Move the lamp closer." Caleb obeyed. Elaine knelt beside Mercy with the kind of calm that made panic feel ashamed of itself. She warmed her hands near the stove before touching the dog, then let Mercy smell her fingers. Mercy gave a weak growl. Elaine nodded as if the dog had said something reasonable. "I'd growl too, sweetheart." She opened the bag. Caleb watched every movement. Thermometer, stethoscope, gauze, a small flashlight, a packet of something sterile. Elaine worked gently, speaking under her breath, explaining each touch before she made it. "Checking your heart now. Looking at that paw, honey? No one's taking you anywhere." Mercy trembled but allowed it. When Elaine touched the injured paw, Mercy jerked and snapped weakly at the air. Caleb moved before thinking, not toward Elaine, toward Mercy. He placed his hand flat beside the dog's head and spoke low. "No teeth needed, I've got you." Mercy's eyes found him. Her body remained tense, but she stopped struggling. Elaine glanced at Caleb. Something passed across her face, not surprise exactly, recognition. "She trusts you," Elaine said. Caleb shook his head. "She doesn't know me." "Sometimes that makes it easier." He looked at her. Elaine bent back over the paw. "People carry history. Animals feel it before we explain it." The words settled too close to the truth. Caleb said nothing. Elaine cleaned the wound carefully. There was a deep cut between the pads, packed with ice and dirt. Not fresh, but reopened by walking. The leg above it had bruising under the fur. Mercy had not simply wandered through snow. She had been hurt before she ever reached Caleb's porch. Elaine's mouth tightened. "What did this to her?" Caleb asked. "Hard to say." But her voice said otherwise. Caleb heard it. "What aren't you saying?" Elaine wrapped the paw with gauze, then secured it with a soft bandage. "I've seen marks like this on dogs that were kept on rough chain lines. Bad ground, frozen mud, wire, sometimes worse." Caleb's jaw tightened. Mercy's eyes were closed again, but at the sound of his breathing changing, they opened. He forced himself calm, not for Elaine, for the dog. "Is she going to live?" Elaine did not answer quickly. That was how Caleb knew it was bad. "She has a chance," Elaine said finally. "She's underweight, dehydrated, hypothermic, and that paw is infected, but she made it here." "That tells me something." "What?" Elaine looked at Mercy. "That she had a reason." The fire popped. Caleb's eyes moved to the table. The rusty collar sat under the lamp like an accusation. The folded note beside it looked too small to carry so much weight. Elaine followed his gaze. "What is that?" Caleb did not answer. He stood slowly and picked up the note. The paper trembled between his fingers despite everything he did to stop it. Elaine watched him. "Caleb," he handed it to her. She read the first line. Her face changed, not dramatically. Elaine was too practiced for that, but something in her eyes broke open, just enough for Caleb to see the grief behind them. "Is this," she began, "Hannah's handwriting?" Elaine looked down at the note again. The room was quiet except for Mercy's breathing and the storm at the glass. Elaine had known Hannah. Everyone in Briar Falls had known Hannah. She was the kind of woman people remembered in present tense by accident. The kind who made soup for funerals, remembered birthdays, and once drove 20 miles in a storm to help Elaine deliver a litter of barn kittens because the mother cat had chosen the worst possible night to need mercy. Elaine lowered herself into the chair beside the table. For the first time since arriving, she looked old. "Read the rest," Caleb said. "I don't think I should be the one. I already read the first line." "Then keep going." Caleb stared at the note. His name waited there in ink. Not printed, not typed. Written, by a hand that had not touched paper in 3 years. He forced himself to read aloud. "Caleb, if this ever finds you, it means Mercy made it home." His voice almost failed. He started again. "I know you will ask how. I know you will think this is impossible, but I need you to trust the part of your heart that always knew dogs understand roads better than people do." Elaine closed her eyes. Caleb kept reading. "I found her outside the clinic 2 weeks before Christmas, the year you were deployed. She was only a pup then. Too thin, too quiet, and too proud to let anyone see she was afraid. I named her Mercy because that was what she needed and maybe what I needed too." Caleb stopped. The paper blurred. Hannah had never told him about a dog. Why had she never told him? Maybe because by then their calls had become shorter, not from lack of love, but from exhaustion. His world had been sand, noise, orders. Hers had been doctor visits, winter roads, and the brave voice she used so he would not hear how weak she was becoming. Elaine spoke gently. "Keep reading." Caleb drew a breath. I wanted to keep her, but the treatments got harder and I knew I could not give her what she deserved, so I placed her with a family outside town. Good people, I thought. If I was wrong, Caleb, I am sorry. Mercy shifted on the floor. A faint sound left her throat. Caleb looked at her. Elaine's hand went to her mouth. He read the final lines. If Mercy ever finds you, it means God has allowed one lost thing to carry another lost thing home. Please do not turn away from her. She may need you, but my love, I think you may need her too. There was no signature, only one small line beneath it. H. Caleb stood in the middle of the kitchen, holding a letter from a dead woman while a dying dog breathed beside his stove. For a long time, no one spoke. The storm filled the silence. Then Elaine, who had saved animals for 30 years and buried her own husband under a white church steeple 6 winters ago, wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand. She always did know how to find the broken ones, she whispered. Caleb looked at her. Elaine gave a small, sad laugh with no humor in it. My David used to say the same thing about me, that I couldn't pass a wounded creature without bringing it home. Her eyes dropped to Mercy. After he died, I kept working because animals still needed me. But the truth is, Caleb, some days I think I only kept the clinic open because I didn't know where else to put the love. That sentence entered the room quietly, but Caleb felt it land. He looked toward Hannah's scarf, then at Elaine, then at Mercy. 3 wounded lives in one cabin, a widowed vet, a retired SEAL, a starving German shepherd with Hannah's letter hidden inside an old collar. For the first time in years, Caleb had the strange feeling that his grief was not a locked room. It was a road, and somehow impossibly this dog had walked it back to him. Elaine cleared her throat and returned to work. She needs fluids. I can do some here, but she should be at the clinic by morning if the road opens. She stays here tonight? Elaine looked up. That may not be wise. She came here. Yes, and she may still need equipment I don't have in my bag. Then bring the equipment here. Elaine gave him a look. Still giving orders, Commander? I'm asking. No, you're not. For a second, something almost like a smile moved between them. Then Mercy coughed. It was soft, wet. Elaine's expression changed instantly. She leaned down, pressing the stethoscope to Mercy's chest again. Caleb crouched beside her. What? Elaine did not answer. She moved the stethoscope to another spot. Mercy coughed again, harder this time. Her whole body tightened under the blanket. Caleb felt the room grow smaller. Elaine reached into her bag for the thermometer again, then checked Mercy's gums, then her eyes. Elaine! The vet's face had gone very still. That cough wasn't there before, Caleb said. No. What does it mean? Elaine looked toward the window where the snow had now covered half the glass. Then she looked back at Mercy. It means the storm may not be the only thing she brought inside with her. Mercy tried to lift her head, but a violent shiver ran through her body. The bandaged paw scraped against the floor, and then Caleb saw it. Under the fur along Mercy's neck, hidden where the rusty collar had rubbed her raw, was a small, fresh puncture mark. Elaine saw it too. Her face went pale. Caleb, she whispered, this dog may have been poisoned. Mercy's body went stiff beneath the blanket, and the tiny puncture mark on her neck changed the whole room. For one breath, Caleb could not move. The mark was no wider than the head of a nail. It sat just below the thick fur line, half hidden under the place where the old leather had rubbed her skin raw. If Elaine had not moved the fur aside with her thumb, they might never have seen it. But now that Caleb had seen it, he could not stop seeing it. A clean puncture, not a thorn, not a bite, not the kind of wound a dog picked up crossing frozen fields. Someone had put something into her. Elaine leaned closer, her silver hair falling forward as she studied the skin around the mark. When? Caleb asked. Elaine did not answer right away. That made the cold inside him worse than the storm outside. Elaine, I don't know. Guess. She sat back on her heels and looked at Mercy's face. The German shepherd's eyes were open but unfocused now. A thin shine of saliva gathered at the edge of her mouth. Her breathing had become wetter, faster, as if every inhale had to fight its way through her chest. Elaine's voice lowered. It could be a sedative, could be something meant for livestock. Could be a bad injection that got infected. The symptoms don't give me one clean answer yet. But poison is on the table. Yes. Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked toward the windows. Beyond the glass, the storm pushed its white body against the cabin as if it wanted back in. The road to town was hidden. The pine trees bent under the weight of snow. Somewhere out there in the dark miles Mercy had crossed was the place she had run from, and possibly the person who had done this. Mercy coughed again. Harder. Her ribs pulled in sharply. Her bandaged paw scraped against the floorboards. Caleb reached for her, then stopped himself before touching too fast. Easy, Mercy, he whispered. I'm here. Her eyes moved toward him, barely, but enough. Elaine opened her medical bag with quick, controlled hands. I can start fluids, she said. I can bring her temperature up slowly. I can treat for shock and infection, but if this is a toxin, I need more than what I brought. What do you need? My clinic kit. You don't have it? I have a field bag, Caleb, not a whole clinic. What specifically? Elaine pulled a small pouch from the bag, then stopped. Her face said she was calculating time, distance, weather, odds. Caleb knew that look. He had worn it himself. I need the emergency cabinet, she said. There are injectables there, charcoal suspension, stronger antibiotics, oxygen support, warming pads. If she starts seizing, I need anticonvulsants. Mercy shivered violently at the word as if her body had understood. Caleb stood. I'll go. Elaine looked up sharply. No, you just said she needs it, and you won't make it down the ridge. I know the road. The road is gone. Then I'll take the service trail. Caleb, he was already moving. He crossed the room and pulled his heavy coat from the hook beside the door. Hannah's blue scarf brushed his sleeve as he reached past it. He froze. For 3 years, he had avoided touching it. Not because it was sacred, because it was alive in a way the rest of the house was not. A plate could be washed, a photograph could be dusted, a room could be repainted, but the scarf still held the shape of her leaving. Elaine watched him from beside Mercy. Caleb kept his eyes on the door. I can get there and back. In this, yes, you are not 28 anymore. No, and this is not a mission. Caleb turned to her then. The old part of him rose in his eyes, not hard, not angry, but clear. There's a life on the floor. Elaine's mouth closed. Mercy gave a weak whine. Caleb looked down at her, and the hardness left him instantly. He crouched beside the German shepherd and placed his palm flat on the floor near her muzzle the way he had before. You carried Hannah's letter to me, he said softly. Now I carry something back for you. Mercy's nose twitched toward his hand, that was all, but Caleb took it as an answer. He stood and grabbed the keys to the old truck from the bowl by the stove. Elaine rose too. You will not take the truck past Miller's Bend. I won't need to. What does that mean? Caleb opened the mudroom door and pointed through the small back window. Behind the cabin, half buried under a tarp and 2 winters of neglect, sat an old snowmobile. Elaine stared at it. That thing still runs. It did in 2019. That does not comfort me. It shouldn't. He pulled on gloves. Elaine moved closer, lowering her voice. Caleb, listen to me. If you get stranded, I cannot leave her to find you. If she crashes while you're gone, I may not have enough. Tell me what to bring. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then Mercy coughed again, and the argument ended. Elaine hurried to the kitchen drawer, found a pencil, and wrote on the back of an envelope with quick, sharp strokes. Emergency cabinet, top shelf, left side, green case. Then the oxygen unit under the steel table. Bring the portable battery beside it. There is a brown bottle marked charcoal suspension. There are 2 white boxes of warming pads. Do not take anything else unless I tell you. Caleb took the envelope. Keys. Elaine reached into her coat pocket and threw him a ring. There's a back door, key with the red cap. He caught it. And Caleb, he looked back. If the road is blocked, turn around. He said nothing. Caleb, I heard you. That is not the same as agreeing. For the first time that night, a tired half-smile touched his face. No. Then he stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a wall. It stole the air from his lungs and turned every exposed inch of skin to pain. Snow rushed sideways under the porch roof, glittering in the weak light before vanishing into the dark. Caleb pulled the door shut behind him, leaving the cabin's warmth, the fire, Elaine, and Mercy on the other side. For a second he stood there and listened. The storm had a voice in the mountains. Not one sound, but many. Wind in the pines, ice against glass. Branches cracking under weight. The deep hollow moan that rolled down from the ridge before a stronger gust came. Caleb had hated that voice since Hannah died. Winter used to be her season. She loved the first snow, loved wool socks and cinnamon coffee and the way the mountains disappeared and came back changed. After she was gone, snow became nothing but a cover, a white sheet over everything he had lost. Tonight, for the first time in 3 years, he stepped into it for someone living. The snowmobile fought him. The tarp had frozen stiff. The pull cord jammed twice. The engine coughed, died, coughed again. Caleb cursed once under his breath, then laid his gloved hand on the machine's cracked handlebar. Not tonight, he said. On the 4th pull, the engine caught. A rough, angry roar broke through the storm. Caleb swung one leg over, turned the headlight toward the tree line, and drove into the white. The service trail behind the cabin was barely a trail even in good weather. It cut through old timber, dropped behind a frozen creek bed, then climbed toward the backside of Briar Falls. Ranchers used it in summer. Hunters used it in fall. Nobody with sense used it at midnight in a blizzard. Caleb leaned forward over the handlebars and let the machine crawl. The headlights showed him only 20 feet at a time. Pines, snow, black trunks, more snow. The world became a tunnel. He kept Elaine's envelope tucked inside his coat, close to his chest. Every few minutes his mind tried to drag him backward to the cabin. Mercy's breathing, the puncture mark, the way she had collapsed after he read Hannah's note. He forced himself to focus on the trail. Left of the split boulder, slow over the buried root. Avoid the creek edge. His body remembered what grief had almost made him forget, how to move with purpose. 10 minutes in, the trail disappeared completely. A fallen pine blocked the way, its branches buried under snow, its trunk thick as a telephone pole. Caleb stopped so close his headlight filled with bark and ice. "Of course," he muttered. He looked left, too steep. Right, narrow but possible. The drop beyond it fell toward the creek bed where black water moved under thin ice. Caleb stared at the gap. Then he saw Mercy again in his mind, ribs showing, paw bleeding, rusty collar in her mouth. He turned the handlebars right. The snowmobile slid. For a breath, the back end swung toward the drop. Caleb shifted his weight, boots digging, shoulders screaming with old scar pain as he fought the machine back. The track caught a buried root. The whole frame lurched. He pushed harder. "Come on!" The machine crawled past the trunk with inches to spare. A branch snapped against his cheek. Warm blood touched his skin, then froze at the edge of his jaw. He did not stop. By the time the first lights of town appeared through the storm, his hands had gone numb around the grips. Briar Falls slept under snow. The feed store sign was dark. The diner windows were black. The little church on the corner stood silent, its white steeple almost invisible against the sky. Elaine's clinic sat at the far edge of Main Street, a low wooden building with a paw-print sign swinging violently in the wind. Caleb killed the snowmobile near the back door. For one moment, the sudden silence rang in his ears. Then he heard something behind the clinic, a metal sound. Soft. Wrong. Caleb turned. The alley behind the clinic was a narrow strip between the building and a line of storage sheds. Snow drifted high against the walls. The security light above the back door flickered in the wind. Another sound came. A chain dragging. Caleb's body changed before his mind did. He lowered his profile, stepped away from the light, and listened. There it was again, not close, but not far, a clink, then a scrape, then silence. He scanned the alley. Nothing moved, only snow, only shadow. Still, the hair at the back of his neck rose. Mercy had arrived with a puncture mark and a collar that had held Hannah's letter. Someone had hurt her. Someone might have followed her. And now something was moving behind the clinic in the middle of a storm no sane person would be out in. Caleb slipped the red-capped key into the back door and entered quickly. Inside, the clinic smelled of disinfectant, hay, old coffee, and animals. The emergency lights glowed faintly along the hall. Somewhere in the boarding room, a dog stirred in its sleep and gave one low bark. "It's all right," Caleb said automatically. His voice sounded too loud. He found the emergency cabinet exactly where Elaine had said it would be. Top shelf, left side, green case. He took it. Then the charcoal bottle. Then the warming pads. Then he moved to the steel table and lifted the portable oxygen unit from beneath it. The battery beside it was heavier than expected. He slung its strap over his shoulder, wincing as it pulled against his scar. A noise came from the back door. Caleb went still. The clinic's old floorboards creaked beneath him. He waited. Another noise, not the wind, a slow pressure on the door handle. Someone was outside. Caleb set the oxygen unit down without a sound. The handle moved again. Down, up, down, testing. He reached for the nearest object on the counter. A metal instrument tray. Not a weapon, but enough to make noise. Enough to buy a second. The handle stopped moving. Then came a voice from outside, low, muffled by the door. "Doc!" Caleb did not answer. The voice came again. "Elaine, you in there?" It was a man. Caleb stepped closer, staying out of the narrow window. The man outside muttered something Caleb could not catch. Then boots crunched away from the door, moving toward the side of the building. Caleb waited until the steps faded. Then he moved fast. He grabbed the equipment, opened the back door a crack, and looked out. The alley was empty, but in the fresh snow near the clinic door there were boot prints, large, deep, and beside them a second line of marks, a dragging chain. Caleb's stomach tightened. He followed the marks with his eyes. They came from the direction of the old road north of town, the road that led to the abandoned kennels outside Briar Falls, the road nobody used anymore. He did not have time to follow them. Mercy did not have time. Caleb loaded the gear onto the snowmobile and tied it down with frozen fingers. As he tightened the last strap, something caught his eye near the clinic wall, a small patch of dark red against the snow. Blood, not much, just a smear. And pressed into it was one partial print, a dog's paw. Caleb stared at it. Mercy had not been alone. The thought came with such force that he nearly stepped back. Not alone. There had been another dog, maybe more. He looked toward the dark road beyond town. The wind erased the boot prints grain by grain. He wanted to follow. Every instinct in him turned that way. But then he pictured Mercy's eyes losing focus on the cabin floor. He started the snowmobile. "Hold on," he whispered, though she could not hear him. "Just hold on." The ride back was worse. The storm had thickened. Snow swallowed his tracks almost as soon as he made them. Twice he had to stop and clear ice from the headlight. Once the machine bogged down in a drift so deep he had to climb off and pull until his back burned. Halfway up the ridge, the sky flashed white, not lightning. A transformer blew somewhere below town. For one silent second, the mountains glowed. Then Briar Falls went dark. Caleb looked back. The few scattered lights in the valley blinked out one by one. The clinic, the diner, the church. Then the ridge behind him. Then his own cabin ahead, hidden beyond the trees. The power was gone. "Elaine," he said under his breath. He drove harder. At the cabin, the porch light was dead. Only firelight flickered faintly through the windows. Caleb killed the engine, grabbed the green case and oxygen unit, and ran for the door. Snow dragged at his boots. The battery slammed against his side. His shoulder screamed. He opened the door. The cabin was too quiet. Elaine was on the floor beside Mercy. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her face was pale. A hand-crank flashlight lay beside her, casting wild shadows across the room. Mercy was convulsing, not violently, but enough. Her legs trembled in sharp waves. Her jaw worked. Her eyes were open too wide, seeing something none of them could. Elaine looked up. "Now, Caleb." He dropped beside her and opened the green case. Elaine moved with terrifying speed. "Hold the light." He held it. "Closer." He moved it. "Not in her eyes." He adjusted. Elaine drew medication, checked the label, measured, then injected with a steady hand. Mercy jerked once. Caleb had to press one palm lightly against the blanket near her shoulder, not restraining her, only keeping her from striking the stove. "You're all right," he whispered. "You're all right, Mercy, stay." Her body shook harder. Elaine connected the oxygen tubing and placed it near Mercy's nose. The portable unit hummed weakly on battery. Caleb watched Mercy's chest. One breath, a pause, another. Too long before the next. "Why isn't it stopping?" he asked. "It may take a minute." "She doesn't have a minute." Elaine did not look at him. "Talk to her." "I am." "Then talk like you mean to keep her." The words struck him harder than they should have. Caleb looked down at Mercy, the German shepherd who had crossed the mountain with Hannah's letter. The dog Hannah had named when she was sick and still thinking of someone else. The dog who had pressed her nose to his hand like she had chosen him before he had any right to choose her back. Keep her. The phrase opened something in him. Caleb shifted closer, lowering his face near Mercy's ear. "Listen to me," he said, voice rough. "You don't get to come this far and quit on my floor." Mercy's eyes flickered. "You hear me? Hannah sent you home, so you stay." Elaine's hands paused for half a second. Caleb kept going. "I don't know why she didn't tell me about you. I don't know where you've been. I don't know who put that mark on your neck. But I swear to you, girl, if there are more like you out there, I'll find them." Mercy's trembling began to slow, not stop, but slow. Caleb touched the floor beside her muzzle. "I'll find them," he whispered again. "But first you stay." For 3 minutes the cabin held its breath. The fire sank low. The storm beat against the walls. Elaine watched the German shepherd's chest with the focus of someone holding a thread between life and death. Then Mercy took one deeper breath, then another. The tremors softened into shivers, her jaw relaxed. Elaine closed her eyes for 1 second. "She's responding." Caleb bowed his head. He did not call it a prayer, but it was the closest thing he had done in years. Elaine adjusted the blanket and checked Mercy's pulse again. "She is not safe yet," she said, "but she is still here." Caleb nodded. His whole body felt hollow now, emptied by cold and fear and the sudden weight of the promise he had just made. "If there are more like you out there, I'll find them." He had said it to keep Mercy with him, but he had meant it. Elaine looked toward the door. "You found something." Caleb raised his head. "At the clinic," she said. "Your face changed when you came in." He glanced at Mercy, then reached into his coat pocket with numb fingers. He pulled out a small piece of chain, rusty, broken. He had found it frozen near the blood behind the clinic and taken it without thinking. Elaine's expression darkened. "Where was that?" "Behind your building. There were boot prints, chain marks, blood, and a dog paw print." Elaine said nothing. The wind moaned in the chimney. Caleb looked at the rusty collar on the table, then at the broken chain in his hand. "They came from the North Road," he said. Elaine's face tightened. "The kennels." "What kennels?" She looked away. For the first time since Caleb had known her, Elaine Porter looked afraid. Years ago, there was a breeding property north of town. Bad place. It was supposed to be shut down. Supposed to be? Before Elaine could answer, Mercy lifted her head. It was weak, slow, but deliberate. Her ears pointed toward the front door. Caleb turned. At first, he heard only the storm. Then came the sound, a vehicle engine, slow, approaching through the trees. Elaine stood. "No one should be able to get up that road tonight," she whispered. Headlights swept across the dead porch window. Mercy gave a low, broken growl. Caleb rose and moved between the dog and the door. A fist struck the wood 3 times, hard. Then a man's voice called from outside. "Caleb Rourke, open up. I'm here for the German Shepherd." The knock came again, 3 hard strikes against the cabin door. Mercy growled from the floor, weak but certain, and Caleb Rourke felt something in that sound move through the room like a warning. He had heard dogs growl out of pain before. He had heard dogs growl out of fear. This was neither. This was recognition. Elaine Porter stood beside the stove with one hand still near the oxygen tube, her face pale in the wavering firelight. The power was out now, and without the porch lamp, the windows were black mirrors except when headlights swept across them from outside. The man at the door called again. "Rourke, I know you're in there." Caleb did not move right away. He looked down at Mercy. The German Shepherd had lifted her head barely 2 inches from the blanket, but her eyes were fixed on the door. Her lips trembled over her teeth, not because she had strength to fight, because whatever stood outside had followed her into the only warm place she had found. Elaine whispered, "That voice. You know him?" "I think so." Caleb's eyes stayed on the door. The fist struck again. "Open it, Caleb. This is official business." Elaine's mouth tightened. "Deputy Harlan." Caleb remembered the name, Wade Harlan, Sheriff's Department. Broad shoulders, small-town badge, the kind of man who carried rules like they were fence posts and expected everyone else to stay behind them. Caleb had no quarrel with him until now. He stepped toward the door. Elaine caught his sleeve. "Caleb," he looked back. "Let me talk first," she said. Mercy made a small, broken sound, and both of them looked down. The dog's gaze had not left the door. Caleb gently moved Elaine's hand from his sleeve. "No," he said, "not first." He crossed the room and stood with one hand on the latch. He did not open it wide, only enough for the cold to enter and the man outside to become real. Deputy Wade Harlan stood on the porch in a brown winter jacket over his uniform, hat pulled low, snow crusted along his shoulders. Behind him sat a county truck, engine running, headlights glowing through the storm. A metal animal crate rested in the bed of the truck, strapped down under a tarp. Caleb saw it immediately, so did Elaine. Harlan looked past Caleb into the room. His eyes found Mercy on the floor. "There she is." Caleb stepped into the gap, blocking his view. "You drove up here in a blizzard for a sick dog, for a reported stolen animal." The words hung between them. The storm rushed around Harlan's boots and blew snow across the threshold. Elaine moved closer behind Caleb. "Stolen," she said. "Wade, that dog dragged herself here half dead." Harlan's jaw shifted. "Evening, Doc. Do not evening me. That animal is under emergency care. And I'm not here to interfere with medical treatment. I'm here to identify and secure property until ownership is confirmed." Caleb's voice stayed low. "Property?" Harlan looked at him. "Dog belongs to North Ridge Shepherds." Elaine went still. Caleb heard that silence. North Ridge, the old kennels, the place Elaine had been afraid to name. Mercy growled again. The sound was weaker this time, but Harlan's eyes flicked toward her with something Caleb did not like. "She knows you," Caleb said. Harlan looked back sharply. "I responded to a call there earlier tonight." "What call?" "Loose dogs, possible break-in. Owner reported one missing female." Elaine stepped beside Caleb now. "Who is the owner?" "Silas Voss." Elaine's face changed, not surprise, recognition mixed with dread. Caleb saw it. Harlan saw it too, and his posture hardened as if he expected a fight. "Silas Voss," Elaine said. "That place was supposed to be closed. It was inspected and cleared to operate with restrictions." "By whom?" "That's not your concern tonight. It became my concern when a starving German Shepherd came into my care with an infected paw, hypothermia, and a puncture wound in her neck." Harlan frowned. "A puncture wound?" "Yes." His gaze moved past them toward Mercy. For 1 second, his expression shifted. Not enough for Caleb to trust him, enough for Caleb to notice. Then the deputy's official mask returned. "I'll note it in the report." "You'll do more than note it," Elaine said. Harlan looked tired suddenly, not cruel, tired in the way men get when they know the rulebook in their hand does not match the scene in front of their eyes. "Elaine, I have a signed ownership claim, a description matching the animal, and a complaint of theft." Caleb opened the door wider and stepped onto the porch. The cold wrapped around him instantly, but he barely felt it. "No one stole her." "Then how did she get here?" She walked. In this storm? Yes, Harlan's eyes narrowed, carrying a collar from what I heard. Caleb's body went still. Elaine looked at him. Harlan had not been told that, at least not by them. The old instincts moved quietly inside Caleb, turning over details. The crate in the truck, the speed with which Harlan had arrived. The fact that he knew about the collar. Caleb's voice dropped. Who told you that? Harlan held his gaze. The owner. Owner wasn't here. He said the dog took something from the property when she ran. Caleb stepped closer. And he knew she brought it to me? A gust of wind hit the porch so hard the county truck rocked on its suspension. Snow blew between the two men, briefly whitening Harlan's face. The deputy looked away first. Rourke, I'm not your enemy. Then don't act like one. I'm acting like a deputy. No, you're acting like a man who came to take a dying dog from the only place she felt safe. Harlan's mouth tightened. Inside the cabin, Mercy coughed. Elaine immediately turned back to her. Caleb did not. He kept his eyes on Harlan. The deputy lowered his voice. You want the truth? I don't like Voss. I don't like that kennel. I don't like being up here tonight. But unless I have evidence that animal is being abused, the law says she goes into county hold until the claim is settled. She won't survive being moved. That's for the vet to certify. Elaine's voice came from inside. I certify it. Harlan looked past Caleb. I need that in writing. You'll have it. Good, then she stays here for tonight. Caleb did not relax. For tonight. Harlan drew a folded paper from inside his jacket. The paper was damp at the edges from snow. Temporary medical hold. Expires at 9 tomorrow morning unless extended by animal control or court order. After that, she transfers to county custody pending ownership review. Elaine stood slowly. Wade, that is not enough time. That's what I can do. Then do more. His eyes flashed. You think I don't know what this looks like? I think you know exactly what this looks like. Harlan looked toward Mercy again. The German shepherd's head had lowered back to the blanket. Her eyes were still open, still watching him, but her growl had faded into a faint rumble under her breath. The deputy's face changed again, a crack in the wall, small but there. Then he saw the rusty collar on the kitchen table. The old leather lay beneath the lamp, split open at the seam, Hannah's note beside it. Harlan stepped closer to the doorway. What is that? Caleb moved slightly, blocking the line of sight. Not yours. Is it evidence? It's personal. Everything attached to this dog may be evidence. Then get a warrant. Elaine turned. Caleb. But Caleb did not take the words back. Harlan looked at him for a long moment, then instead of pushing, he exhaled. Fine. That surprised Caleb. Harlan folded the paper and held it out. Here, what happens. I leave the dog in Dr. Porter's care at this address until 9 a.m. I notify animal control and the sheriff. You do not move her without medical reason. You do not hide her. You do not go up to North Ridge playing soldier in the dark. Caleb said nothing. Harlan's eyes sharpened. I mean that last part. The snow hissed across the porch. Caleb took the paper. Why? Because Voss is claiming someone cut his outer fence. Did someone? I don't know yet. You believe him. I believe there's a missing dog, a broken chain, and a man with a temper who knows enough laws to make trouble. Elaine stepped back to the doorway. And you still want to send Mercy back there? Harlan's face tightened. I didn't say that. You said county custody. That's not the same as returning her. To her it might be. Those words landed harder than anger. Even Harlan felt them. He looked into the cabin again. Mercy lay wrapped in a blanket beside the stove, the oxygen tube near her nose, her bandaged paw tucked close. She did not look like property. She looked like a life that had reached the edge and found one porch light still burning. Harlan rubbed one gloved hand over his mouth. My hands are tied unless I have evidence. Caleb lifted the broken chain from his pocket. You mean like this? Harlan's eyes dropped to it. Elaine looked sharply at Caleb. The deputy reached for the chain. Caleb did not hand it over. Found behind Elaine's clinic, Caleb said. Blood near it, paw print, boot tracks. Same night Mercy shows up with a puncture wound. Harlan's posture changed. This time it was not official, it was alert. You touched it. I picked it up before the snow buried it. That could be evidence. Then use it. Harlan held out an evidence bag from his coat pocket. Caleb looked at it, then at him. You carry those to collect dog chains? I carry them because Briar Falls has more secrets than it has streetlights. For the first time, Caleb saw something behind Wade Harlan's badge that looked almost human, not softness, weariness. A man who had maybe been trying to do the right thing with tools too small for the job. Caleb dropped the chain into the bag. Harlan sealed it. Elaine spoke quietly. There may have been another dog. Harlan's eyes lifted. What? Caleb nodded toward the darkness beyond the porch. Paw print in blood, too small to be hers, maybe a pup, maybe another adult, I couldn't tell. Harlan stared past them into the cabin. Mercy's ears had risen again, not toward Harlan now, toward the north. Caleb followed her gaze. The cabin wall stood in the way, but somehow Mercy seemed to be listening beyond it, beyond the woods, beyond the storm. Harlan saw it too. "What's she doing?" Elaine crouched near Mercy. The German shepherd tried to lift her head higher. Her body shook with the effort. A thin whine slipped from her throat, not pain this time, urgency. Caleb stepped inside. "What is it, girl?" Mercy's eyes stayed fixed toward the dark window beside the stove. Then she did something that made all three adults go silent. She pushed her front legs under her body. The bandaged paw trembled. Elaine reached for her. "No, sweetheart, you can't stand." Mercy tried anyway. Her back legs slid on the floorboards. Her body pitched sideways. Caleb caught the blanket, not her body, afraid to hurt her. She gave a sharp breath, then fought again. "Mercy," he said, "stop." But the German shepherd did not stop. She dragged herself one painful inch toward the window, then another. Elaine's face went white. "She's trying to leave." Harlan stepped through the doorway now, snow falling from his boots onto Caleb's floor. Why would she do that? Caleb knew before he answered, because he had seen the look before, not in dogs, in men who had left someone behind. He moved to the window and wiped frost from the glass with his sleeve. Outside, the truck's headlights cut through the snow, but beyond their reach the trees were dark. The storm had swallowed everything past the porch. For a moment there was nothing. Then Mercy whined again. A sound came from far beyond the cabin, so faint Caleb almost missed it. Elaine lifted her head. Harlan turned toward the door. There it was again, a thin cry, high, brief, almost lost under the wind, a puppy. Elaine covered her mouth. Caleb opened the door before anyone told him not to. The storm roared in. Mercy struggled harder, trying to rise, trying to follow the sound. "No," Elaine said, kneeling beside her. "No, baby, you cannot go." Harlan stood frozen on the threshold. The sound came again. This time there were two cries, then silence. Caleb looked at Harlan. The deputy's face had changed completely. Whatever paperwork he had carried up the mountain, whatever rules he had brought with him, none of them were strong enough for the sound of puppies crying in a blizzard. Caleb reached for his coat. Elaine snapped, "Absolutely not. They're out there. You don't know where. Mercy does. She cannot move." "I can." Harlan grabbed Caleb's arm before he reached the door. "No." Caleb looked down at the hand on his sleeve. Harlan let go, but did not step back. "You go out blind, you die blind. We do this right." Caleb stared at him. "We." Harlan swallowed. Then he turned toward the county truck. "I have a thermal blanket, flares, and a spotlight. There's a search rope in the bed. If those pups are close, we may find them. If they're not, we call for help." "Phones are down," Elaine said. "Radio in the truck still works." Caleb reached for the flashlight. Elaine stood between him and the door. "And Mercy." Caleb stopped. The German shepherd had collapsed again, breathing hard from the effort of trying to rise. Her eyes were fixed on him now, not pleading for herself, pleading for what was outside. Elaine looked from Caleb to Mercy, and the fight went out of her face. "I stay with her," she said. 5 minutes out, 5 minutes back, no heroics." Harlan gave a grim nod. "No heroics." Caleb almost laughed at that. There had been a time when people said that to him before every mission, and there had always been some part of him that did not listen. Tonight he looked at Mercy. "I'll bring them back," he said. The German shepherd's eyes softened. Then her gaze shifted, not to the door, to the table. Caleb followed it, the rusty collar, the note, and beneath the split leather something he had not noticed before, a second fold in the collar's inner band, smaller than the first. He stepped to the table and lifted it. The leather had cracked further under the heat of the lamp. A tiny metal shape slipped out and struck the wood with a soft tap. A key, old, brass, no bigger than Caleb's thumb. Harlan stepped closer. Elaine stared. Caleb picked up the key. Stamped into its head were 2 letters and a number, NR6. Elaine whispered, "North Ridge." Harlan's face drained of color. Caleb looked at him. "What is NR6? The deputy did not answer. Outside, the puppy cried again, closer this time. Mercy gave one broken bark from the floor. Harlan's eyes moved from the key to the storm. Then he said the words that turned the whole night colder. "NR6 was the kennel building they told us had burned down 7 years ago." Caleb closed his hand around the key. The puppy cried once more from the darkness. And somewhere beyond the trees, an unseen chain began to drag through the snow. The puppy cried once more from the darkness, and Caleb Rourke felt the sound reach straight through the storm and close around his heart. It was thin, small, almost impossible to hear under the wind. But once he heard it, he could not pretend it was anything else. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a puppy was alive in the snow, maybe more than one. Mercy knew it too. The German shepherd lay beside the stove, shaking beneath Elaine's blanket, her amber eyes fixed on Caleb with a desperation that hurt worse than any spoken plea. She had crossed miles with Hannah's letter. She had collapsed, seized, fought poison, and still she was trying to tell them the same thing. Not me, them, save them. Caleb looked down at the little brass key in his palm. NR6, North Ridge. The kennel building Deputy Harlan said had burned 7 years ago, only it had not burned completely. Or someone had lied, or someone had kept a place hidden long after the town believed it was gone. Outside, the chain dragged again. A slow scrape across frozen ground. Harlan's face hardened. That wasn't the wind. No, Caleb said. Elaine moved toward the door with the flashlight. You both heard it, Caleb nodded. Harlan looked out into the storm. The county truck's headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the snow, but beyond the porch the world was all movement and shadow. Pines swayed, snow twisted. The dark between the trees seemed to breathe. The puppy cried again, closer. Mercy lifted her head and gave one weak bark. It was not loud, it was not strong, but it was command enough. Caleb grabbed his coat. Elaine blocked him with one hand against his chest. 5 minutes, she said. I heard you. No, hear me again. 5 minutes. This dog cannot lose you too. Caleb looked past her to Mercy. The words landed harder than Elaine knew. This dog cannot lose you too. Hannah had lost him slowly at first. Not from death, from distance, from duty. From calls missed because he was on assignment, from conversations shortened because one of them was trying not to worry the other. Caleb had always thought he would have time to come home and fix what the years had stretched thin. Then time was gone. Mercy whimpered. Caleb's hand closed around the brass key. I'm coming back, he said. He was not sure whether he said it to Elaine, to Mercy, or to Hannah's scarf by the door. Harlan came in from the porch carrying a bundle from his truck, a coil of search rope, 2 flares, a heavy spotlight, and an orange thermal blanket. We stay tied together once we leave the porch, he said. Caleb looked at him. Harlan met his eyes. You know the woods. I know where the old service cut runs. Neither of us sees through a blizzard, so we do this smart. It was the first thing Harlan had said all night that Caleb fully respected. Elaine took the flare from him and shoved it into Caleb's coat pocket. If you hear anything close, mark your position. If you see a pup, wrap it before you carry it. Tiny bodies lose heat fast. Caleb nodded. And if Mercy worsens, Elaine swallowed, I'll keep her here. Mercy's eyes followed Caleb as he moved toward the door. He stopped beside her and crouched. The German shepherd's breathing was shallow but steadier now. The oxygen tube rested near her muzzle. Her bandaged paw twitched against the blanket as if some part of her body still wanted to run. Caleb placed his palm on the floor. Mercy dragged her nose to it. Show me, he whispered. Her eyes moved, not to the front door, not to the road, to the back window, the one facing the creek trail. Caleb turned. The cries aren't from the road, he said. They're behind the cabin. Harlan frowned. The north road is east. Not if someone cut through the creek bed. Elaine went pale. There's a drop behind the lower pines. I know, she looked at Mercy. The German shepherd's eyes remained fixed on that window. Harlan muttered under his breath. That dog is tracking from inside a cabin. Caleb stood. She carried a dead woman's letter through a storm. I'm done doubting her. He opened the door. The storm entered like a living thing. Snow rushed across the floor. Firelight bent in the draft. Elaine moved quickly to shield Mercy from the cold while Caleb and Harlan stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind them. The world outside had become white and black. White snow, black trees, nothing else. Harlan looped the rope around his waist and tossed the other end to Caleb. Caleb secured it with old, practiced hands, testing the knot by feel. The deputy noticed. Navy taught you that? Life did. They moved off the porch together. The first 10 yards were easy because the truck headlights still held them. After that, the light thinned. Snow swallowed the beam. The cabin behind them became a warm blur, then a shape, then almost nothing. Caleb raised the flashlight. The beam shook over drifts, branches, and the half-buried trail behind the woodpile. No tracks. The storm had erased everything. Then the puppy cried again. Both men stopped. It came from below, not ahead, below. Caleb turned toward the creek bed. Harlan heard it too. That drop is steep. Yes, you have a safer way down? Not tonight. They moved slowly. The snow deepened past Caleb's boots, then to his knees. Every step became a fight. Branches clawed at his coat. Ice cracked beneath hidden layers of powder. The rope between them tightened, slackened, tightened again. At the edge of the slope, Caleb dropped to one knee. The creek below was mostly frozen, but not fully. Dark water moved in narrow veins between shelves of ice. On the far side, a line of old pines leaned over the bank, their roots exposed like fingers. The cry came again, from the far side. Harlan swept the spotlight across the creek. For a moment they saw only snow, then something moved near the roots, small, dark. Caleb's chest tightened. There! Harlan adjusted the beam. A puppy lay half buried beneath the roots, its little body pressed against a rusted length of chain tangled in the brush. It was black and tan, no bigger than a winter boot, its fur rimed with ice. It lifted its head and cried. Caleb started down the slope. Harlan grabbed the rope. Slow. But Caleb was already moving, half sliding, half climbing down through snow and frozen grass. The bank gave way under his left foot. He dropped hard to one knee, pain flashing up his leg. Harlan braced above him and held the rope tight. "No heroics," Harlan called. Caleb looked up once. "Then keep up." He reached the creek edge and stepped onto the ice. It groaned. Harlan came down behind him, heavier, cautious, spotlight tucked under one arm. "Edges are thin," the deputy said. "I know." They moved across where snow had covered the thickest shelf. Caleb tested each step before trusting weight. The puppy cried from under the roots, weaker now. Halfway across, Caleb heard another sound, not the puppy, a whimper, farther left. He turned his head. Harlan saw him stop. "What? There's another one." The deputy swept the light left. At first, nothing. Then two tiny eyes reflected under a fallen log, a second puppy. This one was curled inside a torn feed sack, shaking so hard the sack moved around it. Harlan whispered something Caleb could not hear. The first puppy cried again, two puppies, maybe more. Caleb reached the far bank and climbed toward the roots. He pulled Elaine's thermal blanket from inside his coat and spread it open with numb fingers. "Easy," he said to the puppy. "I've got you." The puppy tried to crawl away, but the chain tangled near its back leg. Caleb froze. The chain was not attached to the puppy. It was attached to a small wire loop that had caught around a root, and the puppy had become trapped beneath it. Caleb worked his fingers under the frozen metal. The cold burned. The puppy whimpered. "I know," Caleb whispered. "I know, little one." Harlan knelt beside him and held the spotlight steady. For all his earlier talk of property and paperwork, the deputy's face now looked different under the snow, younger somehow, stripped of certainty. "Can you free him?" Trying. The wire would not bend. Caleb pulled harder. The puppy cried out. He stopped instantly. Harlan reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a small multi-tool. "Use this." Caleb took it without looking. Together they worked the wire loose until it snapped free of the root. Caleb lifted the puppy into the thermal blanket, wrapping it close to his chest. The little body was terrifyingly cold, but alive. "Get the second," Caleb said. Harlan hesitated only a second, then moved toward the fallen log. Caleb tucked the first puppy inside his coat against his body heat and scanned the bank. The roots formed a dark opening behind where the puppy had been trapped, not a natural hollow, a drainage tunnel. Old boards had been nailed around it years ago and half covered with brush. Snow packed the entrance, but behind it, Caleb saw darkness, and on one side of the opening, barely visible beneath ice, was a metal plate, NR6. His hand went to the brass key in his pocket. Harlan. The deputy had lifted the second puppy from the sack and wrapped it in the edge of his own coat. He turned. Caleb pointed to the plate. Harlan came closer, spotlight beam shaking slightly. The light hit the metal letters, NR6. For a long moment, the deputy said nothing. Then his jaw set. "They told us this was gone." "Who told you?" "Voss, County Records, an inspector who retired right after." Caleb looked at the tunnel. The puppy inside his coat made a tiny sound. From deep inside the darkness, something answered, not one cry, several. Harlan's face went white. Caleb pulled the brass key from his pocket. "No," Harlan said instantly. "There are more inside, and that tunnel could collapse. There are more inside." Harlan grabbed his sleeve. "Caleb, listen, we have two alive. We get them to Elaine, call it in, come back with equipment. No phones, power down, storm covering the entrance. We mark it." "With what, a prayer?" Harlan's grip tightened. "You go in there and it drops, those pups still die and so do you." Caleb looked at him. Then he looked down at the shivering puppy against his chest. Small life, small breath. A thing that had no paperwork, no owner, no protection except whoever chose to kneel in the snow and care. He thought of Hannah's note. If mercy ever finds you, it means God has allowed one lost thing to carry another lost thing home. Mercy had not only carried a message, she had carried a map. Caleb pulled free. "I'm going in." Harlan cursed under his breath, then thrust the second puppy into Caleb's arms. "Hold him." Caleb blinked. The deputy unlooped his rope, tied one end around a thick pine root, then shoved the other end toward Caleb. "If you are going to be stubborn, at least be tied to something." Caleb almost smiled, almost. Harlan took both puppies back, wrapping them inside his coat and thermal blanket. "I'll get these two to Elaine and come right back." "No, stay close. I may need the rope." "Then you better not take long." Caleb tied the rope around his waist and moved toward the tunnel entrance. The brass key fit into a rusted padlock half buried behind the boards. At first it would not turn. He pushed harder. The key resisted. Then with a small crack the lock opened. The sound was almost gentle. The boards shifted when Caleb pulled them aside, releasing a smell of cold earth, wet wood, old straw, and something stale beneath it. He paused, letting the air move. No sharp chemical smell. No smoke, no immediate collapse. He lowered himself into the opening. The tunnel was narrow, too narrow to stand. He had to crouch, then crawl. Snow melted from his coat and dripped onto frozen dirt. The flashlight beam moved over old paw prints, bits of straw, and drag marks in the dust. The cries grew clearer. 3, maybe 4. Caleb crawled deeper. Behind him, Harlan called, "Talk to me." "Tunnel holds so far." "That is not as comforting as you think." Caleb kept moving. The rope scraped along the ground behind him. After 10 feet, the tunnel widened into a low, underground room reinforced with old beams. It might once have been a storage cellar or kennel overflow. Now it was a hidden place beneath the ruins of a building everyone believed had burned. The flashlight found a wooden crate, then another, then the puppies. 4 of them huddled in a corner beneath a torn blanket, pressed together so tightly they looked like one trembling shape. German Shepherd pups, black and tan, eyes too large in their small faces. One tried to bark and produced only a squeak. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. "Alive." "Found them," he called. Harlan answered from outside, voice muffled. "How many?" 4. "Can you carry them?" "Yes." He moved toward them slowly. "It's all right," he whispered. "Mercy sent me." At the sound of the name, one puppy lifted its head. Caleb stopped. Mercy, they knew her, the mother. The realization hit him with such force he had to place one hand against the dirt wall. Mercy had not come to him because she was lost. She had left her puppies behind because she was the only one strong enough to find help. She had dragged Hannah's collar to the one door Hannah had trusted. Caleb gathered the torn blanket with the puppies inside and pulled it close. They whimpered, wriggled, weak but alive. He tucked them carefully against his chest, wrapping them with the last of the thermal lining. Then he heard wood crack above him, a slow, heavy sound, the kind old beams make before they decide to stop holding. Caleb froze, another crack, dirt fell across his shoulder. "Harlan!" The rope tightened behind him. "Move," Harlan shouted. Caleb turned toward the tunnel entrance. The beam of his flashlight bounced wildly over the dirt walls. He kept one arm around the puppies and crawled with the other, dragging himself forward. The tunnel seemed narrower now, the air colder. The rope pulled at his waist. Another crack split the dark. Part of the ceiling dropped behind him. Dirt and snow burst into the tunnel. The puppies cried against his chest. Caleb pushed harder. The entrance was ahead, a pale square of storm light. Then the ground under his left hand collapsed. His arm plunged through a hidden pocket of rotten boards. Pain shot up his shoulder. He nearly dropped the puppies and twisted his body hard to protect them. The tunnel shifted. More dirt fell. "Caleb!" Harlan shouted. "I'm here." "Give me your hand." Caleb crawled another foot. The entrance was close enough now that he could see Harlan's outline crouched outside, arm extended into the dark. But the puppies were between them. Caleb pushed the bundle forward first. "Take them." "Your hand. Take them." Harlan reached in and grabbed the blanket. One by one, he pulled the puppies out into the storm and tucked them into the thermal blanket with the first 2. Caleb felt the weight leave his arms. For 1 second, relief made him careless. The beam above him snapped. The tunnel came down. Snow, dirt, and old wood crashed over his back and legs. The world went black and heavy. The rope jerked tight around his waist. Caleb's chest slammed against the frozen ground, knocking the air from him. He could not move. For a moment, he heard nothing. Then Harlan's voice came from far away. "Caleb!" Caleb tried to answer. No sound came. Pressure pinned his legs. Dirt filled his mouth. His shoulder burned white-hot where the old scar had torn open under strain. He forced one hand beneath his chest and pushed. Nothing. The tunnel had him. Above the ringing in his ears, he heard the puppies crying outside. Alive. That mattered. He tried to breathe. The air came shallow, too shallow. Harlan shouted again. "Rourke, answer me!" Caleb turned his face enough to clear dirt from his mouth. "Here." The word barely escaped. The rope tightened. Pain exploded through his waist and ribs as Harlan pulled. "Stop," Caleb gasped. The pulling stopped instantly. "What's wrong?" "Pinned." "How bad?" Caleb looked back as much as he could. Darkness, dirt, weight, bad enough. There was a silence outside, not long, but long enough. Then Harlan said, "I'm coming in." "No, don't argue. Puppies. They're wrapped. Get them to Elaine." "And leave you buried?" Caleb closed his eyes. There it was, the moment every man in a uniform eventually meets. The choice between the mission and the life in front of him. Harlan had arrived as a man with paperwork and a crate. Now his voice carried no paperwork at all, only decision. Caleb managed. Rope won't hold too. Then I won't use the rope. Harlan, but the deputy was already digging. Caleb heard him tearing at boards, throwing snow, grunting with effort. Dirt shifted near Caleb's shoulder. A crack of light appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. The tunnel groaned. Harlan, get out. Not happening. You have 6 puppies out there. And I'm not making 7 orphans tonight. The words hit Caleb so unexpectedly that even pinned under half a collapsed tunnel, he almost laughed. Instead, he coughed. Cold dirt pressed harder against his ribs. His mind began to do dangerous things. It moved away from the tunnel, toward the cabin, toward Hannah's scarf, toward Mercy lying on the floor, eyes full of impossible trust. He saw Hannah standing in the doorway the winter before her diagnosis, smiling at him through falling snow, telling him he always tried to carry everything alone. You don't have to prove you're strong by refusing help, Caleb. He had forgotten that sentence, or buried it. Now it came back clear. Harlan's hand broke through beside him. Can you reach me? Caleb tried. His fingers moved an inch, not enough. The deputy cursed, then dug harder. Wood snapped. Snow fell. The tunnel shifted again. Harlan. Reach. Caleb forced his arm forward. Pain tore through his shoulder. His fingers brushed leather. Harlan's glove. The deputy clamped down on his wrist. I've got you. The words were simple, but something in Caleb broke at the sound of them, not the cruel kind of breaking. The kind that lets air into a room that has been closed too long. Harlan pulled. Caleb pushed with whatever part of him still answered. The weight over his legs shifted, then slid. A board scraped across his boot. Dirt collapsed behind him as Harlan dragged him toward the entrance by inches. 1 inch, then another, then cold air hit Caleb's face. The storm returned. Hands grabbed his coat. Harlan hauled him out of the tunnel, and both men rolled hard into the snow as the entrance caved in behind them. For a moment they lay there beneath the pines, breathing like men pulled from the bottom of a river. The tunnel was gone. The entrance buried. The plate NR6 vanished under snow and earth. But beside Harlan, wrapped in thermal blankets, 6 German Shepherd puppies trembled and cried. Alive, Caleb turned his head. Harlan was staring at the collapsed tunnel. Snow clung to his eyebrows. Blood marked one side of his cheek where a branch or board had cut him. He looked shaken in a way no badge could hide. You saved me, Caleb said. Harlan did not look at him. You saved them first. That was all he said. Together they gathered the puppies. Caleb could barely stand. His left leg shook. His shoulder throbbed. Harlan took most of the weight without being asked, tucking 3 puppies inside his coat and helping Caleb carry the others. They climbed back up the slope slowly. No one spoke. The storm seemed quieter now, though Caleb knew it had not softened. Maybe it was only that the sound of puppies breathing inside the blankets had become louder than the wind. Halfway up, Caleb looked toward the trees. Something moved near the old service trail. A shape. Tall, still. Harlan saw him stop. What? Caleb raised the flashlight. The beam cut through snow and found only pine trunks. But at the edge of the light, just before darkness took it, Caleb saw boot prints, fresh, facing the creek. Someone had been watching. Harlan saw the prints too. His face darkened. Move, he said. They pushed the last stretch toward the cabin. By the time they reached the porch, Caleb was half numb and limping hard. Harlan kicked the door once with his boot. Elaine opened it instantly. Warmth spilled over them. Her eyes went from Caleb's face to Harlan's coat to the blankets in their arms. Then she saw the puppies. Oh, Lord, she whispered. Mercy heard them before she saw them. The German Shepherd lifted her head from the floor. Her body was too weak to rise, but when Elaine carried the first puppy inside and placed it near her blanket, Mercy made a sound Caleb had never heard from any animal before. It was grief, relief, love, all of it at once. The puppies wriggled toward her, blind with cold and instinct. Elaine worked fast, checking each one, rubbing tiny bodies with towels, warming them near the stove, but not too close. Harlan laid his own coat on the floor and placed 3 puppies on it without a word. Mercy stretched her neck toward them. One puppy reached her muzzle. She licked it once. Then again, her eyes closed. Caleb leaned against the wall, too exhausted to move. Hannah's scarf hung inches from his shoulder. For the first time in 3 years, he did not step away from it. Elaine looked up from the puppies. All 6 are alive. The room exhaled. Even Harlan bowed his head, but the relief did not last because Mercy suddenly stiffened, her ears lifted, her eyes opened and fixed on the window, not toward the creek, toward the front road. A second later, the county radio in Harlan's truck crackled outside, loud enough to cut through the wall. A voice burst through the static. Harlan, this is Voss. I know you're at Rourke's place. That dog is mine. The pups are mine, too. Harlan went still. Caleb looked at him. The radio crackled again. You have until morning to bring them back, or I'll come with papers that make every one of you regret touching my property." Mercy growled from the floor. This time all 6 puppies pressed closer to their mother. Harlan walked slowly to the door, opened it, and listened to the radio hiss in the storm. Then he turned back toward Caleb and Elaine. The deputy's face had changed. The last of the official distance was gone. "He just threatened a witness," Harlan said. Caleb pushed himself away from the wall. "A witness?" Harlan looked at Mercy, then at the puppies, then at the rusty collar and Hannah's note still open on the table. "No," he said quietly. 7 witnesses." Outside, the storm kept falling. Inside, Mercy lowered her head over her pups. And Deputy Wade Harlan took off his badge, set it beside Hannah's letter, and said the words that opened the next fight. "Have until sunrise to prove North Ridge was never closed." Deputy Wade Harlan's badge sat on Caleb Rourke's kitchen table beside Hannah's letter, and for a moment no one in the cabin seemed to know which one carried more weight. The badge was scratched from years of weather and duty. A small-town badge. Nothing grand, nothing polished for ceremony. It had been pinned to Harlan's coat when he arrived to take Mercy away in a metal crate. Now it lay beside the note that had brought a starving German shepherd home. Caleb stared at it. "What are you doing?" Elaine asked quietly. Harlan kept his eyes on the window where snow still twisted beyond the glass. "Making sure I remember which side I'm on." No one answered. The fire cracked low in the stove. The cabin smelled of wet wool, smoke, antiseptic, and puppy breath. 6 tiny German shepherd pups lay against Mercy's belly, wrapped in warm towels, twitching and nursing weakly while their mother watched every person in the room with exhausted vigilance. She had not slept, not truly. Every time the wind hit the door, her ears lifted. Every time Harlan's radio hissed outside, her body tensed over her pups. Poison, hunger, and pain had brought her nearly to death, but motherhood kept pulling her back from the edge. Caleb knew that kind of force. Love could make a creature cross impossible ground. It could also leave one standing in an empty kitchen for 3 winters, unable to move a scarf from beside the door. Harlan looked at the old collar on the table. "North Ridge was never closed," he said again. "If we can prove that, Voss loses the ownership claim." "And Mercy?" Caleb asked. "She becomes evidence in an animal cruelty investigation." Caleb's jaw tightened. Harlan raised one hand. "I know how that sounds, but evidence gets protected, property gets returned. Right now, protection is what we need." Elaine nodded slowly. "He's right." Caleb did not like hearing it. But he knew truth when it entered a room, even wearing a uniform he did not trust. "What proof do we need?" Harlan pulled a chair from the table and sat down heavily. Snow melted from his sleeves and dripped onto the floor. He looked older now than he had on the porch. The night had taken the stiffness out of him and left something rawer behind. "Records," he said. "Photos, physical evidence from the site, vet documentation, the chain, the puncture wound, the hidden kennel building, the pups. But if Voss gets a judge before we do, he'll push this as stolen breeding stock." Elaine's eyes flashed. "Breeding stock?" Mercy growled softly from the floor. Harlan looked at the dog. "I'm saying what he'll say, not what I believe." Caleb stood very still. "What do you believe?" The deputy rubbed both hands over his face. "I believe I looked away too many times because the paperwork came back clean." Elaine's expression softened, but only a little. "Wade." "No," he shook his head. "Don't make it kinder than it is. I got complaints. Years back, noise, smell, dogs getting loose. Voss always had inspection forms, always had some county approval, always had just enough legality to make a deputy feel like pushing harder would cost the town money it didn't have." He looked toward Mercy. "And maybe I wanted the paperwork to be true because then I didn't have to climb that hill and see what was really there." The cabin went quiet. Caleb had not expected confession from Harlan. He had expected excuses. Confession was harder to answer. Elaine lowered herself beside Mercy and checked the oxygen tube. The German shepherd's eyes followed her, but she did not pull away anymore. One puppy had found warmth beneath Mercy's foreleg and made a tiny clicking sound as it nursed. Elaine touched the pup with the back of one finger. "They're too weak to move far," she said. "Mercy, too. We hold them here until the road clears or until we can bring proper transport." Harlan glanced toward the window. "Sunrise in 4 hours." "Voss said morning," Caleb said. "He'll come before that if he thinks he's losing control." Caleb walked to the mudroom and took down his rifle from the locked wall case. Elaine looked up sharply. "No," he did not turn. "I'm not going hunting." "Then why are you taking that down?" "Because men like Silas Voss understand unlocked doors as invitations." Harlan stood. "Caleb, listen to me carefully. If he comes here, we do not give him a story where he becomes the victim." Caleb turned then. There was anger in him, yes, but not the old wild kind, not the directionless anger he had carried since Hannah died. This was cleaner. It had a shape, 6 puppies, 1 mother dog, a letter hidden inside a collar, a promise spoken beside a dying animal. "I'm not looking for a fight," he said. "I'm making sure he doesn't find an easy one." Harlan held his gaze, then he nodded once. "Fair." He picked up his radio from the table, adjusted the dial, and tried again to reach dispatch. Static answered. He tried the sheriff. Static. He tried county animal control. Nothing. The storm had cut Briar Falls off from the world. Elaine pulled a blanket higher around Mercy's back. "She needs rest." "We all do," Harlan said, "but we can't sleep." Caleb looked at Hannah's note. The paper had dried now, curling faintly at the edges. The ink looked fragile beneath the lamp. A dead woman's hand had reached across 3 years and placed a living creature in his care. He picked up the note, folded it carefully, and slid it into the inner pocket of his shirt. Then he took Hannah's blue scarf from the peg. Elaine saw him do it. So did Harlan. Caleb did not explain. He carried it to Mercy. The German shepherd watched him approach, her eyes tired but alert. Caleb crouched, letting her see the scarf in his hands. "This was Hannah S.," he said. Mercy's ears shifted at the name. Caleb's throat tightened. "I don't know if you remember her voice. I don't know if dogs hold memory the way we do. Maybe you remember warmth, maybe hands, maybe a smell." He placed the scarf gently beside her, not on her, not trapping her, just close enough for her to choose. Mercy leaned toward it. Slowly, painfully, she touched her nose to the blue wool, then she closed her eyes. Elaine turned away, wiping her cheek. Harlan lowered his head. Caleb remained still. For 3 years, that scarf had been a monument to absence. Now, beside Mercy and her pups, it became something else. Not proof that Hannah was gone, proof that love could still be used. The minutes that followed moved strangely. No one slept, but the cabin settled into a kind of watch. Elaine treated Mercy in small, careful intervals. She cleaned the puncture wound again, checked the pups one by one, warmed towels near the stove, and wrote notes in a little pocket notebook with the same seriousness a surgeon might use in an operating room. Harlan made a list of everything they had found. Rusty collar, hidden note, brass NR6 key, broken chain, blood behind clinic, second paw print, collapsed tunnel, 6 pups recovered, suspected poisoning. He wrote slowly with the focus of a man building a bridge over a river he should have crossed years ago. Caleb moved through the cabin preparing for morning. He stacked wood by the stove, filled water jugs, checked the back door, cleared a path from the porch to Harlan's truck, though snow covered each shovel mark almost as quickly as he made it. Every so often, he looked through the darkness toward the trees. Once, near 3 in the morning, he saw a pair of headlights far below on the ridge road. They stopped, stayed, then vanished. He did not mention it to Elaine. Harlan saw it too. The deputy joined him at the window. "Was?" Caleb asked. "Could be. He waiting or watching?" Caleb's fingers closed around the curtain edge. Mercy gave a low sound behind them. Harlan looked back at her. "She knows. She knew before any of us." For a long moment, the 2 men stood side by side, watching the snow cover the world. Then Harlan said quietly, "My father had a shepherd." Caleb glanced at him. Harlan kept looking out the window. "Name was June. She followed me everywhere when I was little, slept outside my door every night. When my father drank, she'd stand between us." Caleb said nothing. "He sold her when I was 12, said we needed money. I found out years later he gave her to a breeder 2 counties over." His jaw tightened. "I became a deputy because I thought rules were how you kept bad men from doing whatever they wanted. Turns out bad men learn rules too." The words were not offered for pity. Caleb did not give any. He gave something harder. "Then learn faster." Harlan looked at him. For a second, tension returned. Then the deputy let out a tired breath. "Fair enough." Behind them, one of the puppies squeaked. Mercy shifted, pulling it closer with her muzzle. Caleb watched her, a mother half poisoned, half starved, still using the last of herself to gather what was hers. "She needs a place," he said. Elaine looked up from her notes. "What?" Caleb kept his eyes on Mercy. "When this is done, she and the pups need a place." Elaine's expression softened. "Yes, I have land." Harlan turned from the window. Caleb looked around the cabin as if seeing it clearly for the first time in years. The old shed behind the house, the fenced pasture Hannah had once wanted to fill with goats, the unused workshop where dust gathered on tools he no longer needed, acres of quiet timber, a creek, a porch light. A home that had been waiting for something more than one grieving man. "Hannah always wanted a rescue place," Caleb said. Elaine smiled through tired eyes. "She wanted everything to be a rescue place. She said we could take in old dogs nobody wanted, injured ones that needed quiet." His voice softened. I told her I didn't know the first thing about running something like that. Elaine looked at Mercy. Seems you're learning. Caleb almost smiled. It felt unfamiliar on his face, not wrong. Just unused. Harlan's radio suddenly crackled. All three adults froze. Static filled the room, then a voice came through broken and rough. Harlan! The deputy grabbed the radio. Go. This is Sheriff Bell. Signals poor, you safe. Harlan's face changed with relief. At Rourke's cabin, need immediate assistance at first light. Possible animal cruelty case, Northridge Shepherds, hidden kennel structure, multiple pups recovered, suspected poisoning. The radio hissed. Sheriff Bell's voice returned, thinner. Say again, Northridge. Affirmative. Long static. Then the sheriff said, do not approach Voss alone. Harlan and Caleb looked at each other. The radio cracked again. Repeat, do not approach Voss alone. We have an old file on Northridge. It was sealed after the fire. Elaine stood slowly. Harlan pressed the button. What file? Static. Sheriff, repeat. The answer broke apart. Missing dogs, falsified inspection, one witness recanted, Building 6. Then the signal died. Building 6. NR 6. The cabin seemed to go colder. Harlan tried the radio again. Nothing. Caleb looked at the brass key on the table. Elaine whispered, a witness recanted. Harlan's face had gone grim. Or was forced to. Caleb turned toward Mercy. The German shepherd's eyes were open. She was staring at the door again, not with panic now, with warning. The sound came a second later, not a vehicle, not a knock. A faint metallic clink outside the mudroom door. Caleb lifted one finger to his lips. Elaine moved silently toward Mercy and the pups. Harlan reached for his sidearm but kept it low. Caleb picked up the flashlight and stepped toward the mudroom. The clink came again. Someone was at the back, trying the latch. Caleb moved without sound. The old house knew his weight. He knew which boards complained and which stayed quiet. At the mudroom door he waited, breathing slow. The latch lifted, just slightly, then lowered. Outside, someone cursed under their breath. Harlan moved to the side window, careful to keep out of sight. He wiped a small circle through the frost and looked out. His face changed. He mouthed one word. Voss. Caleb felt the old mission calm settle over him. Not rage, not fear, purpose. The latch moved again, this time harder. Caleb reached out and turned the lock from the inside with a loud click. The movement outside stopped. Then a man's voice came through the door, smooth, cold, and far too calm. Mr. Rourke. I believe you have several animals that belong to me. Caleb did not answer. Silas Voss continued. I know Deputy Harlan is inside, I know Dr. Porter is inside, and I know everyone is very emotional right now, but emotion does not change ownership. Harlan's jaw clenched. Caleb looked at him and shook his head once. Do not speak. Voss gave a soft laugh outside. You people always make this harder than it needs to be. The mother is sick. The pups are valuable. I'll take them back, get them treated properly, and we can all pretend this misunderstanding never happened. Mercy growled from the main room. Low, deep, stronger than before. Voss stopped talking. Caleb heard the pause, then the man's voice changed. There you are, girl. Something in Caleb went cold, not because Voss sounded angry, because he sounded fond, the way a man might speak to a tool he had misplaced. Harlan stepped toward the door, but Caleb held out an arm. Voss continued, you caused a lot of trouble tonight, but you always were the clever one. Elaine's eyes filled with tears of anger. Mercy tried to rise. Caleb turned and spoke softly toward the room. Stay. The German shepherd stopped, not because she obeyed like a trained dog, because she trusted him enough to let him stand between her and what she feared. Caleb faced the door again. Voss, Harlan called, unable to hold back now. Step away from the house. There was a silence. Then Voss laughed once. Deputy, unless you have a warrant, you are trespassing on a private matter. You are at Caleb Rourke's back door at 3 in the morning during a blizzard. I came to retrieve stolen property. You came to intimidate witnesses. Dogs do not witness. Caleb's voice cut through the door. These ones do. The silence that followed was different, sharp. Voss had not expected Caleb's voice. Mr. Rourke, he said slowly, you don't know what you've stepped into. I know enough. No. You know a sentimental letter, a sick dog, and a few half-frozen pups. I know county records, contracts, breeding rights, judges who don't enjoy retired soldiers playing savior. Caleb stepped closer to the door. You know Building 6. The silence outside deepened. Harlan looked at Caleb. Elaine held her breath. Voss said nothing. Caleb continued, calm and low. NR 6, brass key, hidden tunnel under the creek bank. 6 pups recovered from inside. Chain marks, blood, suspected poison. Outside, snow scraped against the door. When Voss spoke again, the softness was gone. You should have stayed out of that tunnel. There it was, the mistake. Harlan's eyes sharpened. Elaine whispered, he admitted it. Caleb looked at Harlan. The deputy lifted the radio and pressed record on the backup device clipped to his coat. Voss did not know. Caleb kept him talking. Why? Because men like you ruin things they don't understand. What don't I understand? That dogs are not children. They are not prayers. They are not dead wives sending messages from beyond the grave. Caleb's hand curled once, then opened. Hannah's scarf rested beside Mercy, the puppy's breath. Elaine watched him, silently begging him not to let anger win. Voss kept talking. They are animals, good bloodlines, good money, and that female cost me more than you can imagine. Harlan's face turned hard as stone. Caleb's voice remained quiet. You injected her. I treated what was mine. With what? No answer. Caleb stepped away from the door and nodded to Harlan. The deputy moved fast. He pulled the door open while Caleb swung the flashlight beam straight into the storm. Silas Voss stood 3 feet from the threshold. Tall, narrow, wrapped in a long, dark coat dusted with snow. His face was pale and lined, his eyes bright with the cornered anger of a man who had spent years believing no one would dare open the locked room. In his right hand, half hidden beside his leg, was a chain lead. In his left was a small metal case. Harlan raised his weapon. Drop it. Voss smiled. This is a mistake. Drop the case. Voss looked past Harlan, past Caleb, into the cabin. Mercy growled. The puppies pressed closer. Elaine stood in front of them with a fireplace poker in both hands. Voss's smile twitched. You've all lost your minds. Harlan stepped onto the porch. You have the right to remain silent. Voss's eyes flashed. On what charge? Animal cruelty, trespassing, witness intimidation. Tampering with evidence. We'll start there and let the sheriff add the rest. You have no proof. Harlan tapped the recorder on his coat. Voss's face changed, just enough. Caleb saw it. The first real fear. Then Voss moved, not toward Harlan, toward the side of the porch. He threw the metal case into the snow and bolted down the steps. Harlan lunged after him. Caleb moved too, but pain shot through his leg from the tunnel collapse and nearly dropped him. Harlan caught Voss at the edge of the truck lights, both men crashing into a drift beside the porch. The chain lead flew from Voss's hand and disappeared under snow. For a few seconds there was only struggle, snow, grunts, the deputy's voice ordering him to stop. Voss fighting like a man who knew the hill he had built his life on was crumbling beneath him. Caleb limped down the steps, but by the time he reached them, Harlan had Voss pinned face first in the snow. The deputy cuffed him with shaking hands. Not from fear, from fury held under discipline, Voss spat snow from his mouth. You think this ends anything? There are records, partners, buyers. You have no idea how far this goes. Harlan leaned close. Then start talking. Voss turned his head enough to look at Caleb. His eyes were full of hatred. She was never supposed to find you. Caleb froze. Harlan looked up. What? Voss smiled through blood at the corner of his mouth. The shepherd, Mercy, that was what your wife called her, wasn't it? Caleb's whole body went still. How do you know that? Voss said nothing. Harlan hauled him upright. Caleb stepped closer despite the pain in his leg. How do you know my wife named that dog? For the first time, Voss looked genuinely pleased. Because she came to Northridge herself. The storm seemed to vanish. Elaine appeared in the doorway behind Caleb, her face white. Voss kept smiling. Sweet woman, sick but stubborn, asked too many questions about where the pup was going. Said she wanted to check on her. Said she had a husband who would come home someday and make things right. Caleb's breath stopped. Hannah had known, not all of it, but enough. She had tried. Even while dying, even while alone, she had tried to protect one frightened puppy. Voss leaned closer. She should have minded her own suffering. Harlan shoved him hard toward the truck. Enough! Caleb did not move. The words had struck something deep, but not the way Voss intended. They did not weaken him. They placed Hannah beside him, not as a ghost, as truth. Elaine came down the steps and picked up the metal case Voss had thrown. She opened it carefully with gloved hands. Inside were syringes, small bottles, and labels scraped half clean. Her face hardened. This is what he used. Harlan nodded toward his truck. Put it in the evidence bag. Then, from somewhere below the ridge, sirens rose, faint, but real. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees several minutes later as Sheriff Bell's vehicle fought its way up behind Harlan's truck, followed by 2 county rescue vehicles and a battered snowplow. The storm had begun to thin at last, just enough for help to climb the mountain. Sheriff Bell was a broad woman in her late 50s with snow in her hair and no patience in her eyes. She took one look at Voss in cuffs, the evidence bag, Harlan's face, Caleb's limp, and Elaine standing guard at the door. Then she said, "Tell me everything." They did, not quickly, not dramatically. Truth does not always need drama. Sometimes it only needs to be spoken in the right room in front of people who can no longer pretend not to hear. Elaine documented Mercy's wounds and the pup's condition. Harlan played the recording. Caleb showed the brass key, the collar, the hidden note, the broken chain. Sheriff Bell listened without interrupting. When the recording reached Voss's words, "You should have stayed out of that tunnel," her face changed in a way that made even Harlan look away. By dawn, Northridge Shepherd's was no longer a rumor. It was a crime scene. Sheriff Bell sent deputies toward the property with Harlan guiding them. The snowplow opened the ridge road inch by inch. Elaine stayed with Mercy. Caleb wanted to go to Northridge, but his leg buckled when he tried to step off the porch. Elaine pointed at him. "Sit down." "I'm fine." "You are bleeding through your sleeve and limping like a man twice your age." "I said I'm fine." Mercy lifted her head and gave a low growl. Caleb looked at her. Elaine folded her arms. "Even the dog disagrees." For the first time in a long time, Caleb laughed. It was small, hoarse, almost gone as soon as it came, but it happened. Elaine smiled. Mercy lowered her head again, satisfied. By mid-morning, the storm had passed. Briar Falls emerged slowly from the white, roofs and fences and pines glittering beneath a pale sun. The mountains looked washed clean, though Caleb knew better now than to trust appearances. Clean snow could cover old chains. Warm paperwork could hide cold rooms. And sometimes a dying dog had to cross a blizzard before people would finally see what had been buried in plain sight. The report from North Ridge came near noon. Harlan delivered it himself. He stepped into the cabin without his hat, face drawn, boots muddy with thawing snow. Behind him, Mercy slept with her pups tucked against her, Hannah's scarf beneath her chin. Caleb stood carefully. "Well," Harlan looked at the floor for a moment, then at Elaine, then at Caleb. "We found 12 more dogs." Elaine covered her mouth. Caleb closed his eyes. Harlan's voice roughened. "Alive, bad shape but alive, 2 locked sheds, 1 underground section behind the burned building, records going back years." "Buyers, payments, inspections, signatures." "Dogs?" Caleb asked. "Being transported to Elaine's clinic in the county shelter. Sheriff called state investigators." Elaine grabbed her coat immediately. "I'm going." Harlan nodded. "They're expecting you." Caleb reached for his own coat. Elaine turned. "No, I can help." "You can help by staying upright." Harlan looked at Caleb's leg. "She's right." Caleb hated that phrase, but Mercy opened one eye from the blanket and looked at him. He sat down. Elaine went to the dog and gently touched her head. "I'll be back, sweetheart." Mercy watched her leave. Harlan remained by the door. After Elaine's truck pulled away with the sheriff's escort, Caleb and Harlan stood in silence. Finally, Harlan said, "I owe you an apology." Caleb looked at him. "You owe her one." Harlan nodded. Then he walked to Mercy and crouched a few feet away, careful not to crowd her. The German shepherd opened both eyes. Harlan removed his hat fully and held it in both hands. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was quiet, not official, not performative. "I saw pieces and called them paperwork. I heard complaints and called them disputes. I let a bad man hide behind clean forms because it was easier than making noise." Mercy stared at him. One puppy rolled onto its back and kicked a tiny paw in the air. Harlan swallowed. "I'm sorry, girl." Mercy did not wag her tail. She did not forgive him in some grand human way. She simply lowered her head again and let him remain in the room. Some forgiveness begins like that, not with trust, with the absence of fear. Caleb sat in the chair near the stove, Hannah's note in his hand. He read the last line again. "She may need you, but my love, I think you may need her too." He looked at Mercy, at the pups, at Harlan kneeling with his hat in his hands, at the scarf no longer hanging alone by the door. All his life, Caleb had believed rescue meant reaching something before it was too late. Pulling someone from water, dragging a body from smoke, carrying the wounded under fire. But Mercy had shown him another kind. The kind that arrives after the funeral, after the silence. After everyone thinks the man is fine because he still chops wood and pays bills and answers when spoken to. She had not saved him from dying. She had saved him from staying buried. Weeks passed. Northridge became the kind of story small towns tell in low voices for years, not because they enjoy it, but because shame needs witnesses if it is ever going to become change. Silas Voss did not get his dogs back. He got charges, many. The inspection records led beyond Briar Falls, beyond one kennel, beyond one man. Harlan testified. Sheriff Bell pushed the case up to the state. Elaine worked nearly around the clock, treating the rescued dogs with a team of volunteers who seemed to appear from every church basement, ranch road, and kitchen in the county. And Caleb opened his land. At first it was temporary. That was what he told himself. A few heated kennels in the old workshop, a fenced run near the creek, a place for Mercy and her pups to grow strong before a proper decision could be made. But then one rescued shepherd leaned against his knee and fell asleep. Then an old K9 with cloudy eyes refused to leave his porch. Then a three-legged pup discovered Hannah's old garden and dug up every sleeping bulb she had planted years before. And Caleb, instead of getting angry, laughed so hard he had to sit on the steps. Elaine saw him from the driveway and stopped walking. She did not say anything. She only smiled. By spring, the sign went up at the end of the road. Not big, not fancy. Just carved wood painted by a retired schoolteacher from town. Rourke Mercy Sanctuary for Wounded Dogs and the people they find underneath in smaller letters. Caleb added Hannah's favorite words. Loyalty, courage, second chances. The day the sign went up, Mercy stood beside him in the grass. She had gained weight. Her coat had begun to shine. The bandage was gone from her paw, though she still limped slightly when the weather turned cold. Her pups tumbled around her legs like living proof that the worst night had not won. Caleb knelt beside her and touched the scar near her neck. It would always be there. So would his. That no longer felt like failure. It felt like evidence. Elaine came up beside him, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Hannah would have loved this, she said. Caleb looked at the sign, then at Mercy. Then at the blue scarf, now tied gently around the porch rail instead of hidden inside the cabin. I think she started it, he said. Elaine's eyes softened. Maybe she did. From the pasture, one of Mercy's pups barked at a butterfly and fell over his own feet. Harlan, who had come on his day off to repair a section of fence, laughed before he could stop himself. Mercy looked at the deputy, then at Caleb. Then she leaned her shoulder against Caleb's leg. He rested his hand on her head. For once, he did not feel the need to say anything. Some healing does not announce itself. It arrives like a dog at midnight, thin, shaking, carrying something old in its mouth. And if you are brave enough to open the door, it may leave muddy paw prints across every locked room in your heart. That evening, after the volunteers had gone and the sanctuary had grown quiet, Caleb sat on the porch with Mercy at his feet. The sky over Briar Falls turned gold behind the mountains. Snow still clung to the high ridges, but down by the creek, the first thin water of spring moved over stone. Caleb took Hannah's letter from his pocket. He had read it so many times the folds were soft now. Mercy lifted her head. You made it home, Caleb said. The German shepherd's tail moved once against the porch boards. Caleb looked toward the little fenced yard where her pups slept in a warm pile beneath Elaine's donated blankets. Then he looked at the road. For years, that road had only taken people away. Now sometimes it brought them back. A truck turned slowly at the far bend. Caleb narrowed his eyes. It was not Harlan's county truck, not Elaine's. An old green pickup rolled toward the cabin, moving carefully over the thawing ruts. Mercy stood, not growling, listening. The truck stopped near the new sanctuary sign. A woman stepped out, older, thin, wrapped in a brown coat. She stood by the gate for a long moment as if gathering courage from the ground beneath her feet. Then she lifted something in both hands, a photograph. Caleb rose. Mercy walked to the edge of the porch and stared. The woman called through the evening air, her voice trembling. Are you Caleb Rourke? Caleb stepped down from the porch. I am. The woman held up the photograph. It showed Hannah, younger, smiling, kneeling beside a German shepherd puppy with amber eyes. Mercy. Caleb stopped halfway down the path. The woman's voice broke. I knew your wife, and there's something about that dog she made me promise I would tell you if Mercy ever found her way back. Mercy pressed against Caleb's leg. The spring wind moved Hannah's scarf on the porch rail. And Caleb realized Hannah's letter had not been the last message after all. The German shepherd pressed against Caleb Rourke's leg as the woman at the gate held Hannah's photograph in both trembling hands. For a moment, Caleb could not move. The late spring light lay soft across the sanctuary sign, turning the carved letters gold. Mercy stood beside him, ears forward, body still, not afraid but watchful in the way she always became when the past stepped onto the road. The woman by the gate looked older than her voice. Her hair was silver and pulled back beneath a wool hat, though the evening had already warmed. Her coat hung loosely on her narrow shoulders. She held the photograph as if it might fall apart if the wind touched it too hard. Caleb walked toward her slowly. Mercy came with him. The woman's eyes moved to the German shepherd, and then with one hand over her mouth she began to cry. Oh, she whispered. It is her. Caleb stopped a few feet from the gate. You knew Mercy? The woman nodded, but it took her a moment to speak. My name is Ruth Bellamy. I used to clean rooms at the clinic where your wife went for treatment. I wasn't a nurse. I wasn't anyone important, but Hannah, she looked down at the photograph. Hannah made people feel like they mattered. Caleb swallowed. Mercy sniffed the air through the fence. Ruth lowered the photograph so Caleb could see it clearly. Hannah was kneeling in the picture, thinner than Caleb remembered from that year, but smiling with the same soft brightness that had once filled every cold corner of their cabin. Beside her sat a German shepherd puppy with oversized ears, amber eyes, and one paw lifted as if she had not yet learned where to put all of herself. Mercy. Around the puppy's small neck was the rusty collar. Not rusty then, brown leather, brass buckle. New. Caleb reached for the photograph but stopped short. "May I?" Ruth handed it to him. His fingers touched the edge carefully. For weeks, Hannah's letter had been enough. Painful, impossible, beautiful enough. But this was different. This was not ink. This was her face, her hand resting on Mercy's little head. Proof that, in a season when Caleb had thought Hannah was only waiting for him to return, she had been quietly trying to save another life. "She asked me to take that picture," Ruth said. "She said someday you might need to see that Mercy was real." Caleb looked up. "Someday?" Ruth nodded. She knew she was getting worse. The words were gentle, but they still struck deep. Caleb had known Hannah was sick, of course he had known, but knowing from a distance had allowed him to believe in the soft lie of more time. There would be another call, another leave request, another treatment, another winter. Hannah had known better. Ruth gripped the gate. She came back to the clinic one afternoon after treatment. Mercy was with her. She told me she had found a place for the puppy, but she didn't trust the man anymore. She had asked questions. Too many, maybe. She said if anything happened, and if the dog ever found her way back to you, I was supposed to tell you one thing. Mercy leaned harder into Caleb's leg. Caleb's voice was barely above a whisper. "What thing?" Ruth's eyes filled again. "She said, tell Caleb I did not send him a dog to make him remember death. I sent him mercy so he would remember how to live." The road went silent. Even the wind seemed to lower itself. Caleb looked down at Mercy. The German shepherd lifted her eyes to his. For so long he had thought the letter had reopened his grief. He had thought Mercy had dragged the past back to his door like a wound that refused to close. But now, standing by the gate of a sanctuary that had once been only empty land, he understood. Hannah had not sent him backward. She had sent him forward, through Mercy, through 6 puppies. Through every wounded dog now sleeping behind warm fences. Through Elaine's tired smile, Harlan's changed heart, Ruth's photograph, and the porch light that no longer burned for a man alone. Caleb looked at the sanctuary behind him. The old workshop had become a recovery room. The pasture Hannah once dreamed of filling with goats now held dogs learning to run again. The cabin that had once held only silence now filled every morning with paws on wood, bowls clinking, Elaine's truck in the drive, Harlan repairing something badly but trying anyway, and volunteers laughing over coffee. Mercy had not erased Hannah's absence. Nothing could. But she had taught Caleb that love did not end where loss began. Sometimes love changed carriers, a scarf, a letter, a collar, a dog, a woman at a gate with a photograph. Caleb folded the picture gently against his chest. "Thank you," he said. Ruth gave a small nod. "I should have come sooner." "No," Caleb said. "You came when the story was ready for you." Mercy stepped forward then and touched her nose through the gate to Ruth's hand. Ruth let out a broken laugh and knelt carefully on the roadside. "Hello, Mercy," she whispered. "You made it, didn't you?" Mercy's tail moved once, then again. Caleb opened the gate. Ruth came inside. That evening they sat on the porch while the sun slipped behind the Montana hills. Ruth told Caleb everything she remembered. Small things, Hannah's favorite tea at the clinic, how she always thanked the janitor by name, how she once gave her own blanket to an elderly man in the waiting room because he looked cold, how even when pain had hollowed her cheeks, she talked about Caleb like he was not far away at all. "She said you were brave," Ruth said. Caleb stared toward the pasture. "I wasn't there." Ruth's voice stayed soft. "She knew you wanted to be." That sentence did not fix everything, but it loosened something. Some chains break loudly. Others simply fall away when the heart is ready to stop carrying them. Mercy lay at Caleb's feet with her head on Hannah's blue scarf. Her pups, no longer tiny and weak, tumbled in the grass below the porch, chasing one another through the golden evening. One of them tripped over Harlan's toolbox and barked as if the toolbox had insulted him personally. Harlan, sitting near the steps with a bandage still across his cheek from the tunnel, pointed at the pup. "That one has no respect for law enforcement." Elaine, standing near the rail with a coffee mug, smiled. "He learned from Caleb." For the first time, Caleb laughed without it surprising him. Not a small laugh, a real one, the kind that came from deep enough to hurt a little. Mercy lifted her head and looked at him, then she sighed and settled back down. As if that sound was the thing she had been waiting for all along. Months later, people in Briar Falls would still talk about the night Mercy came through the storm. Some told it like a miracle. Some told it like a rescue. Some focused on North Ridge, on the hidden kennels, on the investigation that reached farther than anyone expected. But Caleb never told it that way. When visitors asked about Mercy, he would stand beside the fence and watch her move through the grass with her steady limp and her proud head. Then he would say, "She came home carrying a collar." And if they asked what was inside, Caleb would look toward the porch where Hannah's scarf moved in the breeze. "Enough love to open a locked door," he would say, because that was the truth, not all of it, but the part that mattered most. Mercy had arrived starving, wounded, and nearly gone. Caleb had opened the door thinking he was saving her. But every day after, as the sanctuary filled with broken dogs and broken people learning to breathe again, he understood the deeper mercy. The German shepherd had not only needed rescue, she had brought it. She brought it to 6 puppies under frozen roots. To Elaine, who found a place to put the love she still carried. To Harlan, who learned that rules without courage could become hiding places for cruel men. To Ruth, who finally kept a promise that had waited through years of fear. And to Caleb Rourke, a retired Navy SEAL who had survived war but nearly surrendered to an empty house. In the end, Mercy did not bring Hannah back. She brought Caleb back, and maybe that is what love does when it is true. It refuses to leave us where grief found us. It finds another road, another voice, another heartbeat, sometimes even another set of paws in the snow. So if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may be walking through a cold season of their own. They might need a reminder that help can arrive in the most unexpected way. And tell us in the comments, has a dog ever helped you through a hard time? Your story may be the hope someone else needs tonight. Subscribe to walk with us through more stories of loyalty, faith, and second chances. And until the next story, may God bless you, guard your home, and send a little warmth to every wounded place in your heart.